4 months ago, my parents turned my wedding reception into my younger sister's 10th anniversary party. The $63,000 invoice was only the first consequence they thought I would erase for them. What actually changed my family happened much earlier that evening. When I sat down at the bridal table, picked up the cream-colored program resting on my plate, and realized my name was barely on it. Across the front, in gold lettering, were the words, Lauren and Aaron, 10 years of love. Beneath that was a sentence I had never written, approved, or even seen before. A celebration gifted with love by her big sister, Sarah. My thumb stopped against the cardstock. The ballroom was full of music and conversation, but for a few seconds, every sound seemed to move farther away. I opened the program. Lauren and Aaron had a first dance. They had an anniversary cake cutting. They had a slideshow. They had a special toast. The speeches for Ryan and me, the two people who had actually gotten married that afternoon, had been pushed almost to the end. I looked across the ballroom and found my mother watching me. She did not look surprised that I had found out. She looked like she was waiting to see whether I would dare do anything about it. Before I tell you what happened next, I hope you're doing well wherever you're listening from, and stay with me, because what my family thought would happen after I saw that program was very different from what I actually did. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel and stay with me through the end. That afternoon, April 18th, 2026, had started almost exactly the way Ryan and I had planned it. We had gotten married on the ceremony lawn of a historic estate outside Richmond, Virginia, with spring trees behind us and just enough wind to make me grateful the venue had heaters waiting under the covered garden pavilion. The ceremony had been simple compared with the reception we had planned inside. Ryan and I had paid for everything ourselves. We had spent years saving, comparing vendors, cutting things we did not care about, and paying for the things we did. The ballroom was supposed to be the expensive part. Dinner for roughly 150 people. The bar, staff, rentals, music, flowers, and all the ordinary invisible things that make an event look effortless. I knew exactly what it cost because I had signed every page myself. That was part of why the program in my hand bothered me before I even understood the scale of what had happened. I work in commercial operations. My job is basically figuring out what people promised, what they actually delivered, who approved what, and what happens when one of those things stops matching the others. I am not the kind of person who sees something strange and immediately starts screaming. I look for the mechanism. So instead of confronting anyone right away, I read the entire program twice. Then I looked around the room as if I were seeing it for the first time. There was another cake near the dance floor. Not our wedding cake. This one was white and gold with a large number 10 on top. A framed photograph of Lauren and Aaron from their wedding day stood beside it. The projection screen behind the band displayed a title card that read, "A Decade Together." I recognized most of our guests, but several tables on my parents' side were filled with people I had never met. One woman hugged Lauren as if they were old friends. A man near her raised a glass toward Aaron and shouted something about 10 more years. Then I saw Lauren herself. She had changed out of the pale blue dress she had worn to our ceremony and into a fitted champagne-colored dress I had never seen before. That was when Ryan came up beside me. He had been talking to his father across the room and must have seen my face. "What happened?" he asked. I handed him the program. He read the cover, then the first page. His expression barely changed, but I knew him well enough to see his jaw tighten. "Did you agree to this?" "No." "Any of it?" "One anniversary toast." He looked toward my mother. "That's not one toast." "No," I said. "It isn't." I did not march across the ballroom. I did not grab a microphone. I did not give my mother the public confrontation she had apparently prepared herself to survive. I set the program back on my plate and walked toward her. My mother, Patricia, was standing beside one of the floral arrangements talking to my aunt. She smiled when she saw me coming. That smile lasted until I stopped directly in front of her and said, "I need to talk to you privately." My aunt immediately found somewhere else to be. Mom folded her hands. "Sarah, if this is about the program, please don't start." That told me more than an apology would have. "What exactly did you change?" Her eyes flicked toward the room. Nothing that hurts you. That wasn't my question. We're sharing the evening. Lauren and Aaron's 10th anniversary was yesterday. Everyone is already together. It made sense. I agreed to a toast. And they're getting a toast. They're getting a first dance. Mom gave a small sigh, the kind she had used my entire life when she thought I was making something unnecessarily difficult. It's one song. There's an anniversary cake. You already have a cake. There's a slideshow. Sarah, there are guests here I don't know. Her expression hardened a fraction. They're family friends. Whose? Some are Lauren and Aaron's friends. I had seats on our side of the guest list. You told me I could fill them. I stared at her. That part technically was true. Ryan and I had controlled most of the guest list, but I had given my parents a block of seats for extended relatives and old family friends because I did not know every cousin or former neighbor they cared about inviting. I had never imagined my mother would quietly turn part of that allocation into an anniversary guest list. You knew what I meant when I gave you those seats. And you knew Lauren's anniversary was this week. I almost laughed, but nothing about it felt funny. So that makes this okay? It makes this practical. 2 celebrations, 1 family, 1 room. Nobody loses anything. I do. Mom's face changed. Not much, but enough. She looked past me toward the tables, toward the people already seated, toward the enormous room she had apparently decided belonged to everyone except the bride who had paid for it. Then she lowered her voice. Don't do this in front of everyone. There it was. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I should have asked. Not even, I thought you would like it. Her concern was that I might react where other people could see me. I'm not doing anything in front of everyone, I said. Good. Because Lauren has no idea you're upset. And I will not let you humiliate your sister over something meant to make the night more special. I looked at her for a few seconds. You changed my wedding after I told you what you could have, and somehow I'm the one threatening to humiliate somebody? You're being dramatic. No, I'm asking what you changed. And I answered. No? You told me why you think you were entitled to change it. Mom's mouth tightened. You have everything tonight, Sarah? Everything. A beautiful venue, a wonderful husband, a career, a life you built exactly the way you wanted it. Your sister gets 1 10th anniversary. I didn't think sharing an hour would destroy you. That sentence told me something I would spend the next several months understanding. My mother did not think she had taken anything from me because, in her mind, I had enough. If Lauren needed something and I had more of it, whether that something was time, money, attention, or apparently my wedding reception, redistribution was not theft, it was fairness. Before I could answer, Lauren came toward us. She glanced from Mom to me. What's going on? Mom immediately said, Nothing. I looked at Lauren. Did you know about this? Her eyebrows rose. About what? I handed her the program. Lauren looked at the cover, then back at me. Mom said this was your surprise. I watched her carefully. My surprise for you? Yes. Mom stepped in. Because I knew Sarah wouldn't want you worrying about it beforehand. That is not what happened, I said. Lauren's face went pale enough that for one moment I wondered if she really had been lied to, too. Wait, you didn't do this? I approved an anniversary toast. Lauren looked at Mom. You said she wanted to do something bigger. Mom snapped. Can we please not dissect every conversation in the middle of the reception? I ignored her. Lauren, did you know there was going to be a first dance? Lauren hesitated. Only for a second. Yes, but Mom said you approved the schedule. The cake? Another pause. I knew there was a cake. The slideshow? I thought that was part of the surprise. I glanced at the champagne dress. Lauren noticed. Her cheeks reddened. Mom told me to bring something nicer for later. Something about that answer bothered me, but I did not yet know enough to say why. Lauren could have been telling the truth. Mom could have told her I had approved everything. I was angry, but anger is a terrible substitute for evidence, and I was not going to accuse my sister of a conspiracy just because my mother had clearly crossed a line. I need to talk to the coordinator, I said. Mom reached for my arm. I moved before she touched me. Sarah, stop. Think about what this looks like. I looked directly at her. I am. Then I walked away. Ryan joined me before I reached the side doors. You okay? No. It was the first honest answer I had given anyone that day. He nodded once. What do you need? I need to know who authorized this. Okay. He did not say he would handle it. He did not tell me to calm down. He did not tell me my mother meant well. He simply walked beside me as I found the venue coordinator, a woman named Claire who had been managing our event for months. Claire's expression changed the second she saw the program in my hand. I think we have a problem, I said. She glanced at the ballroom behind me. I was actually coming to find you. Who authorized the anniversary program? Claire took us into a small service office just off the main corridor, away from the guests. Your mother submitted the family program updates. Why was she allowed to do that? Because she's listed as your family liaison for seating, dietary notes, family speeches, and photo timing. I remembered adding Mom months earlier because she had insisted it would be easier if she handled questions from her side of the family. At the time, it had seemed harmless. I had specifically limited what she could touch. No menu decisions. No guest count increases. No financial changes. Claire must have seen what I was thinking. She did not change your contract, she said quickly. She didn't add headcount or paid services through the venue. The anniversary programs came from an outside printer. The cake was delivered separately. The DJ cues were submitted as family program details. We believed you had approved them. I didn't. I understand that now. Ryan leaned against the edge of the desk. What about those extra guests? Claire pulled up the seating chart. There aren't extra guests. Your guaranteed count is still 150. I moved closer. Claire highlighted my parents' section. You gave your parents 42 seats to assign. 24 of those names were entered by your mother in the last 2 weeks. We had no reason to know they were anniversary guests rather than your family friends. That was when the shape of it became clear. Mom had not hacked my wedding contract. She had not forged my signature. She had done something much more careful. She had stayed inside every small space I had legitimately given her, and used those spaces for a purpose I had explicitly rejected. I looked at Claire. Can you show me what she sent? Claire opened the event correspondence. There it was. A request to move Lauren and Aaron's dance earlier. A slideshow cue. An anniversary cake announcement. Changes to family seating. Every message written as though Patricia Miller were simply helping execute plans already approved by her daughter. Claire scrolled farther. I need you to understand something, she said. None of these messages gave your mother financial authority. You are still the contracting party for the ballroom. I stared at those words on the screen. Still, the contracting party. For a moment, that mattered more than my anger. The ballroom reception represented a huge amount of money. I had already put down a non-refundable retainer. The remaining balance was many times that. Walking away from a room did not automatically make a contract disappear. So I stopped thinking about what Mom deserved. I started thinking about what I could actually do. If I don't want my wedding reception in that ballroom anymore, I asked, what are my options? Ryan turned his head toward me. Claire blinked. You mean tonight? Yes. She sat back slowly. We can stop operating the ballroom as your wedding reception. But before you make that decision, I need to explain exactly what that does to your contract. Behind the office door, the music in the ballroom changed. Guests applauded. Somewhere inside the room, my mother had decided I would never leave. An anniversary celebration was already beginning. I folded my hands on the desk and looked at Claire. Explain it. Claire turned the monitor slightly toward me, but before she began, I pulled out my phone. There was one thing I wanted in front of me before anybody explained contracts or cancellation fees. 3 weeks earlier, my mother had asked whether Lauren and Aaron could have a little anniversary moment during the reception. I remembered the conversation because I had been standing in the grocery store when she called, and I had made the mistake of answering while comparing 2 jars of pasta sauce. Mom had made it sound so harmless that at first I had said yes without much thought. Then, over the next 2 days, a little moment became a cake, a song, and a few vague comments about recognizing 10 years of marriage. That was when I stopped dealing with it verbally and put the boundary in writing. I searched my email for Patricia's name and found the thread almost immediately. Ryan stood beside me while I opened it. My message was still exactly the way I remembered it. A toast is fine. No anniversary dance, no anniversary program, and no separate anniversary event. I want the reception to stay focused on the wedding. Underneath it was my mother's reply. 2 words, of course. I handed the phone to Ryan, and he read both messages without saying anything for several seconds. Then he gave the phone back and asked, "What do you want to save tonight?" It was such a Ryan question that for the first time since I had picked up that program, I almost smiled. He was not asking how we could punish my mother. He was not asking whether he should confront anyone. He was asking me to identify the thing that still mattered. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I know it isn't that ballroom exactly the way it is now." Claire had been polite enough not to read over my shoulder, so I showed her the email. She studied it, then looked genuinely uncomfortable. "That's very clear," she said. I asked whether she had ever seen that message before, and she shook her head. Patricia had never forwarded it. Of course she hadn't. Claire asked whether there had been any later conversation where I changed my mind. I told her no, then remembered something I had almost dismissed at the time. About 3 weeks before the wedding, Mom had asked if Lauren could have a separate anniversary cake. I had said no. She had sighed, told me I was being rigid, and then dropped it. Or I thought she had. A week or so later, I had been reviewing a preliminary music sheet from the DJ when I noticed a song labeled Lauren, Aaron Anniversary Dance. I had called Mom immediately. She had sounded annoyed that I was even asking. "Lauren mentioned a song she likes," she had said. I think the DJ misunderstood. I told her I did not want an anniversary dance. She told me she would have it removed. At the time, I believed the matter was closed because that is how normal adult communication is supposed to work. Someone asks. You say no. They may not like the answer, but the answer remains no. Standing in Claire's office on my wedding night, I finally understood that my mother had not accepted the boundary. She had simply stopped discussing it with me. Claire pulled up the event portal and began walking me through the communication history. Months earlier, I had added Mom as a limited family liaison because she kept complaining that it was ridiculous for every seating question from her side of the family to come through me. At the time, the arrangement seemed sensible. She could submit family names, dietary notes, family photo timing, and suggestions about who would speak when. She could not change the guest guarantee, menu, bar package, pricing, payment method, or any part of the contract. I remembered being very specific about that because I did not want my mother negotiating anything that involved money. What I had not anticipated was how much damage someone could do while technically staying inside a limited permission. Claire opened the message history. Patricia had not written, "Please turn my daughter's wedding into Lauren's anniversary party." She was far more careful than that. One message asked whether the family portion of the program could include an anniversary acknowledgement after dinner. Another supplied a song and described it as the family's special dance cue. Another gave the title of a slideshow and called it a short family presentation. The cake appeared in the notes as an outside dessert delivery that did not change the venue's catering minimum. Even the seating had been done cleanly. Ryan and I had given my parents 42 seats to assign among relatives and longtime family friends. Mom had used roughly 24 of them for Lauren and Aaron's friends without increasing the overall head count. I stared at the names on the screen. None of it required forged signatures. None of it required bribing a careless employee. My mother had simply learned where my permissions ended and worked inside the gray space immediately before them. "So from your perspective," I said, she was adjusting family details I had authorized her to handle. Claire nodded slowly. "That's what we believed. We should have questioned the cumulative effect once the dance, cake, slideshow, and program all appeared together. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But none of those changes altered your financial agreement, and your mother repeatedly described them as things you had approved privately. That mattered to me, even while I was angry. It would have been easy to blame the venue for everything, but the paper trail did not support that. Claire had not given Mom access to my money or contract. Mom had taken legitimate authority over small family details and stacked those details until they became an event inside my event. It was manipulative, but it was not magic. And once I saw the mechanism, I stopped feeling confused. I was still furious, but confusion had been the part making me feel powerless. Claire scrolled farther, then stopped. There is something else. One of the banquet assistants had photographed the packing slip from the carton of anniversary programs when they were delivered, because the box had been placed with our event materials. Claire opened the photo. The printer's name was at the top. Under purchaser was Patricia Miller. The order date was 12 days before the wedding. The description read, custom anniversary programs, cream cardstock, gold print, 100 copies. I leaned closer until I could see the date clearly. 12 days. Not that morning. Not some last-minute idea after the ceremony. Nearly 2 weeks earlier, my mother had paid a printer to put my sister's anniversary on paper. Ryan read the date over my shoulder. That answers one question. It answers several. The worst part was how ordinary the evidence looked. No dramatic letter, no secret recording, just a packing slip. My mother's name, a date, a product description. If she had screamed in my face that she was taking over my wedding, I might have recognized the fight sooner. Instead, she had done what she always did when she believed resistance would inconvenience her. She had moved quietly until the thing was already built, then counted on everyone else being too uncomfortable to tear it down. I took a photo of the packing slip image from Claire's screen and forwarded the toast-only email to Ryan so I would not be the only person with it open on my phone. Then I asked Claire to keep the event correspondence exactly as it was. I did not tell her I was preparing for a lawsuit. I was not. I simply knew better than to let a dispute become a contest of memory when written records already existed. Claire assured me the venue retained the correspondence as part of the event file. I want to talk to my mother one more time, I said. Ryan glanced toward the door. Want me there? Yes, but let me talk. He nodded. We found Mom near the ballroom entrance, speaking to one of Lauren's friends as if nothing unusual had happened. She saw me, then saw Ryan and Claire behind me, and her smile flattened. Sarah, not now. Actually, now is perfect. The woman beside her excused herself. Mom watched her leave, then looked at me with obvious irritation. You're making this into something it doesn't need to be. I held up my phone. On March 27th, I told you in writing there would be no anniversary dance, no anniversary program, and no separate anniversary event. I remember. That stopped me for half a second. I had expected denial. Good. Then we don't have to argue about whether you saw it. Mom crossed her arms. I also remember thinking you were stressed and being unnecessarily strict about something harmless. You ordered those programs 12 days ago. Her eyes moved toward Claire. Claire said nothing. Mom looked back at me. So you planned this after I told you no. I planned something beautiful for your sister. At my wedding. You keep saying that as if people have forgotten whose wedding this is. I gestured toward the ballroom. Her cake. Her slideshow. Her first dance. Her guests. A program saying I gifted it to her. You didn't forget whose wedding it was. You just decided my answer didn't matter. Mom inhaled sharply through her nose. You were overwhelmed. You had a million things to think about. I knew that once you saw it all together, you'd understand that it wasn't taking anything away from you. There it was, cleaner than any confession I could have forced out of her. She did not think she needed my permission if she believed she had made a better decision than I had. My no was not a decision to her. It was a temporary symptom of stress, something she could wait out. You knew I said no, I said. I knew you were being rigid. That isn't the same thing. Sarah, sometimes families share. People share things they choose to give. Her mouth tightened. There are 150 people in that ballroom. What exactly do you want me to do now? Pull the cake? Tell Lauren she isn't allowed to dance with her husband? Rip up the programs in front of everybody? I looked at her for a long moment. She believed she had reached the safe part of the plan. The moment when undoing it would feel more embarrassing than accepting it. She had created social momentum and expected me to surrender to it. I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. Mom gave me a look that almost bordered on relief. Good. Then stop making this bigger than it is. I didn't say I was staying. The relief vanished. What does that mean? It means I'm talking to the venue. Her voice dropped. Do not embarrass this family because you're angry. I had heard versions of that sentence since I was a teenager. If Lauren was upset, she was sensitive. If Mom was upset, everyone needed to calm her down. If Dad was upset, we had to understand how much stress he was under. If I was upset, the problem was, apparently, that other people might see it. Being the reasonable one had always sounded like praise, until I realized how often it meant I was expected to absorb whatever everybody else had already chosen. I'm not interested in embarrassing anyone, I said. I'm interested in deciding what I'm still willing to pay for. Mom looked at Ryan as though she expected him to correct me. He did not. That irritated her more than anything I had said. We walked back to Claire's office. This time, I was ready to hear numbers. Claire pulled up both agreements, the ballroom reception contract and the separate outdoor ceremony and cocktail package. The ballroom contract was a little over $71,000. I had already paid an $8,000 non-refundable retainer. The estimated $63,000 remaining would normally be invoiced on the next business day after the event, once the venue reconciled final bar and service charges. That did not mean I could simply walk out and owe nothing. At that moment, I was still the contracting party. So if I canceled the ballroom tonight, I said, what happens? Claire chose her words carefully. If you simply terminate your event, we would have to apply the cancellation provisions in your agreement. That could leave you responsible for more than the retainer. That's what I assumed. Ryan looked at me. But you said there was another option. Claire nodded. Because your parents appear to want the ballroom event to continue. If they are willing to become the substitute hosts, our manager can approve an ovation. In plain English, we would end your continuing ballroom obligation, keep your retainer, substitute them as the contracting hosts, and replace your payment authorization with theirs. But everyone has to agree in writing, you, your parents, and the venue. And if they don't, then your choices are either continue your reception under the existing contract or discuss cancellation under the existing terms. I rubbed my thumb over the edge of my phone. The answer was not a magic escape hatch. If Mom and Dad refused to take over the ballroom, I could not simply dump the remaining contract on them because they had annoyed me. That was how contracts worked. The interesting part was that they wanted the room. Mom had just made that very clear. Ryan asked, what happens to the outdoor spaces? Those are under the separate package you already paid for, Claire said. The ceremony lawn and cocktail garden are yours through the contracted period. The covered pavilion is part of the weather contingency. I looked up. Could we have dinner there? Claire paused. Not the ballroom dinner for 150 people. I'm not asking for 150. That caught both of them off guard. I walked over to the seating chart still open on the second monitor. The more I looked at those names, the less attached I felt to the number. 150 had never been sacred. It had been a capacity decision. Ryan and I had invited coworkers, extended relatives, family friends, and people our parents said mattered to them because we had the space. What I wanted now was not a smaller version of the same reception. I wanted a room where I did not have to sit through a celebration my mother had built after I explicitly refused it. How many people can the pavilion actually seat? I asked. Claire thought for a moment. Comfortably? 75. Maybe 80 if we push it. But I wouldn't recommend that. 73? That I can do. Ryan looked at me. He knew exactly why I had chosen the number. Before the wedding, we had once made a private list of the people we could not imagine celebrating without if we had been forced to cut the guest count dramatically. Parents, siblings, closest friends, a handful of relatives, a few people from work who had become family. The list had been around 70. I had never expected to use it. Claire began thinking aloud now, not promising anything yet. The kitchen was already operating. The garden bar was already staffed for cocktail hour. Basic tables and chairs were on site. Ceremony flowers could be moved. The acoustic duo that had played before the ceremony could potentially stay, but the full ballroom band could not simply be recreated outside. Dinner would have to be simplified. Service would be less formal. Some elements I had paid for inside would stay inside whether I used them or not. Ryan asked the question I had been avoiding. What would it cost? Claire looked at me before answering. First, the $8,000 ballroom retainer stays with the ballroom. You would not get that back, even if your parents take over the remaining event. Second, extending the garden package into a seated supper for around 73 people would mean additional staffing, food adjustments, linens, and service time. I need 10 minutes to get you an exact number, but I'd estimate another $4,500 to $5,000. I did the math automatically. Nearly $13,000 between the lost retainer and the added garden cost. Money Ryan and I had saved. Money that could have gone toward our future house. Money I would be choosing to lose because my mother had decided the safest time to ignore me was when she thought walking away would hurt too much. For the first time that evening, my anger stopped making the decision simple. Claire must have seen it on my face. You do not have to decide this second. I know. If you stay in the ballroom, we can remove the anniversary cues that haven't happened yet. I looked through the office window toward the corridor. Somewhere beyond it were 150 guests, a second cake, printed programs already sitting on tables, a slideshow ready to run, my sister wearing an anniversary dress, and a mother who had planned all of it because she believed the completed spectacle would be stronger than my no. We could drag pieces of it back. We could cancel the slideshow. Stop the cake announcement. Delete the dance. I could spend the rest of my wedding night policing every microphone and cue to make sure my own reception remained mine. Or I could leave the room. Ryan rested his hand lightly against my back, not steering me in either direction. Whatever you decide based on what you want tomorrow morning, not what saves the most money tonight. I exhaled slowly. Then I looked at Claire. How fast can you tell me exactly what 73 people in that garden will cost? Claire was back in less than 10 minutes with a printed estimate and the expression of someone who knew she was about to ask a bride to make a decision no bride should have to make on her wedding day. She set the paper in front of Ryan and me and walked through it carefully. The $8,000 ballroom retainer was gone, whether I stayed or left. That money had already secured the room and staff, and I was not getting it back. Extending the garden package for 73 people would cost another $4,800 once they added dinner service, linens, staff hours, heaters, and the extra time for the outdoor bar. We could reuse most of the ceremony flowers. The acoustic duo who had played before the ceremony was still on the property and willing to stay. Dinner would not be the plated menu we had chosen for the ballroom. The kitchen could give us a simpler family-style service using food already being prepared, supplemented with a few items that could be redirected without disrupting the other event. I read the estimate twice because that was what I did when numbers hurt. $4,800 more. $8,000 already lost. Nearly $13,000 for the privilege of not spending the rest of my wedding night sitting in a room my mother had decided she could repurpose because she thought I would be too embarrassed to object. I could hear my father's voice in my head even though he was not there yet. That's a lot of money to lose over principle. He would not have been wrong about the first half. It was a lot of money. Ryan and I were comfortable, but we were not rich enough to treat $13,000 like a parking ticket. I earned good money. Ryan did too. We had savings because we were careful, and some of those savings were supposed to become the down payment on a house within the next year or two. Ryan was studying the estimate beside me. If we do this, he said, we don't get to complain tomorrow that it cost us almost $13,000. I know. And if we stay, we don't spend all night wishing we'd left. I know that too. Claire kept her hands folded on the desk. She had already given us the facts. I appreciated that she did not try to sell me one option or make the venue sound heroic for solving a problem it had partly failed to notice. She simply waited while I stared at the page. I had spent most of my adult life believing good decisions were the ones where the math eventually made the answer obvious. This one refused to cooperate. The cheapest option was to stay. We could remove whatever anniversary cues had not happened yet, swallow the ones that already had, and protect the rest of the ballroom money. Financially, that was rational. Emotionally, I knew exactly what the night would become. I would spend every minute checking the schedule, watching the DJ, wondering what my mother had arranged next, and waiting for Lauren to appear with another surprise she supposedly thought I had approved. I would not be celebrating my marriage. I would be monitoring an event. I looked at Ryan, 73. He nodded once. Then 73. Claire immediately shifted from explaining to executing. I'll need a final list. We can begin resetting the pavilion now, but I need your parents to understand something before we do anything with the ballroom. If they want that room to continue after you withdraw your wedding reception, they have to become the substitute hosts. Otherwise, you remain under the existing agreement. I understand. I want the manager present for that conversation. So do I. Ryan and I stepped into the hallway with my phone and the guest list. We did not have time to turn it into a referendum on which people loved us enough. That would have been almost as ugly as what Mom had done. We used the list we had made months before, when we briefly considered a much smaller wedding, Ryan's parents and sister, my closest friend, Elise, and her husband, 2 cousins I had actually grown up with, Ryan's 3 closest friends, a handful of coworkers who had become real friends over the years, aunts and uncles who had shown up for us outside holidays, the people whose presence mattered because of the relationship, not because their names made a ballroom look full. The strange thing was how quickly the list became easy, once I stopped thinking about who might be offended. That had always been one of my mother's favorite forms of control. She could turn almost any decision into a question of who might be hurt by it, until the safest answer was whatever she wanted. I was not doing that tonight. The pavilion held 73. We chose 73. Nobody was being punished. The reception had changed because the event itself had changed. Ryan sent messages to his side. I contacted Elise and asked her to quietly help direct people once we were ready. Claire assigned a staff member to guide the selected guests toward the garden without making a ballroom announcement. Anyone not moving with us would still have dinner, drinks, music, and apparently an anniversary party inside. I was not throwing 150 people into a parking lot. I was choosing where my wedding reception would happen. We had been working for maybe 15 minutes when Mom appeared in the hallway with Dad behind her. She moved so quickly that for a second I wondered who had told her. Then I saw Lauren 20 feet away near the ballroom doors, watching us. Mom stopped in front of me. "What are you doing?" "Moving the reception." She blinked. "What?" "The wedding reception. We're moving it to the garden pavilion." "You can't." "The venue says we can." Dad looked from me to Ryan. "Sarah, what happened?" Mom answered for me. "She's furious about Lauren's anniversary and now she's trying to move the entire wedding outside." "I'm not trying. We're doing it." Dad's eyebrows lifted. "Tonight?" "Yes." He looked toward the ballroom. "There are 150 people in there. There won't be 150 at our reception." Mom stared at me as if I had just announced I was canceling my marriage. "You're going to throw half your guests out because your sister got an anniversary cake?" "I'm not throwing anyone out. They're welcome to stay here. You've already given them something to attend." Her face tightened. "You know exactly what I mean. So do you. Sarah, this is insane. You're throwing away thousands of dollars because you're angry." "That part is true." Mom actually paused. I think she had expected me to deny it. She was used to arguments where everyone tried to prove their choice was painless. I was not interested in pretending mine was. "The ballroom retainer is $8,000, I said. "I'm losing it." "The garden extension costs almost $5,000 more." "I know what this costs." Dad stared at me. "And you're still doing it?" "Yes." Ryan stood beside me without saying anything. He did not need to. Mom looked at him anyway, probably hoping he would be the sane man who talked his emotional bride out of an expensive mistake. He simply held my guest list and waited. Mom turned back to me. "What happens to Lauren's anniversary?" That was the moment I knew I had made the right choice. Not because of the money, not because of the programs. Because with my wedding reception about to leave the room, my mother's first concern was the event she had inserted into it. I don't know, I said. That's up to you. What does that mean? It means I'm no longer hosting the ballroom. You can't just walk away from a contract. I know. That answer unsettled her more than if I had argued. The venue manager, Daniel, came down the hallway carrying a folder. Claire was with him. He introduced himself to my parents, then asked all of us to step into a small conference room beside the ballroom. Lauren followed until Mom told her to wait outside. I noticed Lauren did not argue. She just stood there in her champagne dress, arms folded tightly across her stomach. Daniel did not waste time. He placed a document on the table and said, "Mrs. Carter has asked to discontinue her wedding reception in the ballroom and move her reception to the outdoor pavilion under an expanded version of the existing garden package. The ballroom can continue tonight, but only if another party agrees to become the substitute contracting host." Mom pointed at me. This was her wedding contract. "It is currently," Daniel said. "If nothing changes, she remains responsible under it." Mom gave me a look that practically said, "See?" Daniel continued before she could speak. "However, because you have indicated that you want the ballroom function to continue, we are willing to execute a substitution agreement. If all parties sign, Mrs. Carter will be released from the remaining ballroom obligation. Her $8,000 retainer remains non-refundable. You and Mr. Miller would become the replacement hosts for the continuing event and assume the estimated $63,000 remaining balance." Silence. Dad looked down at the document. Mom looked at Daniel. $63,000? That is the estimated remaining ballroom balance before final bar and service reconciliation. The invoice is issued on the next business day under the contract. Her head snapped toward me. "You expect us to pay $63,000? "No," I said. "I expect you to decide whether you want the ballroom. You know we don't have $63,000 sitting around." "Then don't take it." Dad rubbed a hand over his mouth. "What happens if we don't sign?" Daniel answered him. "Not me." "Then the ballroom remains under Mrs. Carter's current agreement unless she pursues cancellation under its existing terms. We would need to stop and calculate what that means, but you are under no obligation to continue the event yourselves." I watched Dad read the first page. Unlike Mom, he actually read contracts. Not as obsessively as I did, but enough to understand what the number meant. His eyes stopped at the section releasing me from further ballroom liability. Then they moved to the paragraph substituting him and Mom as hosts. "This means Sarah is completely off the remaining ballroom balance?" he asked. "If the agreement is fully executed and your replacement payment authorization is accepted, yes," Daniel said. "Her existing $8,000 retainer stays with the ballroom, but we remove her from future ballroom liability and remove her payment authorization." Mom turned toward me. "You set this up." I almost laughed. "I found out about this option 20 minutes ago. You knew exactly what you were doing." "Yes, once I knew the option existed." Dad looked up. "Sarah, give us a minute." I shook my head. "You can have as many minutes as the venue allows. I don't need to be in the room while you decide." Mom slapped her palm against the table. "You don't get to create this mess and walk out." I stared at her. "I created the mess? You're the one moving the wedding. After you turned the ballroom into Lauren's anniversary, it is still your wedding. Then why are you so worried about what happens to Lauren's party when I leave?" Mom's mouth opened, but Dad cut in. Enough. That was typical Dad. He rarely stopped a bad decision while it was being made. He intervened once people raised their voices because volume, to him, was the real sign something had gone wrong. He looked at me. "If you stay, can they remove the anniversary things?" "Yes." "And you're choosing not to?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I don't want to spend my wedding night policing my own reception." Dad sighed. "Your mother went too far." Mom whipped her head toward him. He continued quickly. "But losing $13,000 and splitting the whole wedding into 2 events is a lot to do over one bad decision. There were a lot of decisions between one toast and what's in that ballroom. She made a mistake. She placed the program order 12 days ago. after I had already told her no. Dad's eyes moved to Mom. For half a second, something changed in his face. You ordered the programs 12 days ago? Mom crossed her arms. I was organizing a family celebration. Dad closed his eyes briefly. I could almost see the calculation in his head. This was the point where a different father might have looked at his wife and said, "You did this, so we're stopping it." My father's instinct was different. He wanted the conflict to disappear without forcing the person who caused it to experience the humiliation of fixing it. He looked at me again. "Can't you just stay tonight and deal with this tomorrow?" "No. Sarah, I've already dealt with it. I'm moving." Mom pushed the agreement away. "Fine. Move. We'll stay here with the rest of the guests." Daniel reached for the document. "Then I need to be clear. If you stay in the ballroom and want service to continue after Mrs. Carter's wedding reception is withdrawn, you need to assume the agreement." Mom stared at him. "We're her parents. That doesn't make you parties to her contract. Everyone is already seated." "I understand. The food is already here." "Yes. The staff is already working." "Yes." Mom looked genuinely offended by his calmness. "So you're telling me you would just shut this room down?" "I'm telling you that we cannot continue a private event without a responsible contracting host." Dad looked at the document again. I said nothing. That was harder than it sounds. The old version of me would already have been explaining alternatives. I would have told Dad what to ask, pointed out which paragraph mattered, suggested he cut part of the program, offered to call someone. Solving things was almost a reflex. The problem was that every time I solved something for my family, they learned that creating the problem was less dangerous. Daniel turned the agreement toward them. "You do not have to sign this. If you do not want to assume the event, say so now, and we will work with Mrs. Carter under her existing cancellation terms." Mom looked toward the ballroom doors. Through the wall, we could hear music and the low roar of a room full of people. For the first time that evening, she looked scared. Not scared of losing me. Scared of walking back into that room and telling everyone the anniversary spectacle she had built was ending. "Michael," she said. Dad did not look at her. "I'm reading it. Everyone is already here, I know. Lauren is expecting the dance." I watched his eyes close for 1 second. Then he picked up the pen Daniel had placed beside the document. "Dad." He looked at me. I did not tell him not to sign. I did not threaten him. I wanted the choice to remain exactly what it was. "The manager just told you that you don't have to do this." I heard him. "If you sign, it's your event." "I know." Mom leaned toward him. "We can sort out the money after tonight." There was the sentence. Not "we can afford it." Not "this matters enough to us to pay for it." Just "we can sort it out later." Dad looked at me again. "You're really going to make us do this?" "No," I said. "I'm specifically not making you do anything." His expression hardened. Then he signed. I felt something in me go quiet. Dad slid the document toward Mom. She signed almost immediately. Daniel then had them complete the replacement payment authorization. Dad used a card account for the guarantee and initial authorization while Daniel's staff verified it. Once that was accepted, Daniel countersigned the substitution agreement. Claire printed executed copies for everyone and sent the confirmation email while we were still sitting there. Daniel pushed my copy toward me. "As of this signature, you are released from the remaining ballroom obligation. The $8,000 retainer remains non-refundable. Your garden extension will be billed under your existing outdoor package." I looked down at the page. My name appeared under outgoing host. Dad and Mom were listed under substitute hosts. The remaining estimated ballroom obligation was $63,000. There was nothing triumphant about seeing it. I had just spent nearly $13,000 to protect my wedding from my own parents. That was not winning. It was choosing which loss I was willing to live with. Mom stood abruptly. "I hope you're happy." "No," I said. "I was happy before I found the anniversary program." Her face flushed. "You will regret humiliating your sister like this." I haven't said one word about Lauren to the guests. "You're taking people outside." "I'm taking my wedding reception outside." "Same thing." "No. It really isn't." Dad gathered his copy of the agreement and folded it once, He looked exhausted already. "We'll talk about this after the wedding." I slipped my copy into the folder Claire handed me. "Not tonight. We need to figure out what happens with this money." "You just did." He stared at me, and I saw a flash of irritation that had nothing to do with contracts. Dad did not like unanswered problems. More specifically, he did not like problems I refused to solve for him. I left before he could ask again. The garden pavilion looked completely different from the polished ballroom. Staff were moving tables while guests stood near the outdoor bar. Ceremony arrangements were being carried in from the lawn. A server was tying fresh linens onto tables that had been intended for cocktails. The acoustic musicians were shifting their equipment closer to the pavilion. Nothing matched perfectly. A stack of chairs sat crooked near the entrance. One centerpiece leaned because someone had apparently carried it outside too quickly. And it was the best thing I had seen all evening. Elise hurried toward me. "I have 71 people accounted for. 2 are in the restroom. Nobody's panicking." "Thank you." She looked past me toward the building. "Do I want to know?" "Not tonight." "Perfect." Ryan joined us a moment later. He had been checking on his parents, who had already moved outside. "We've got about 20 minutes before they can start serving anything." "Fine." He searched my face. "How bad?" $13,000 bad. His eyebrows went up even though he already knew most of the number. "They signed?" "Yes." "Both of them?" "Yes." Ryan waited. I knew what he was really asking. "How do you feel?" "I don't know yet." "That's allowed." I laughed once, quietly. "I hate that you're reasonable. You married me anyway." For the first time since I had opened that program, my shoulders loosened. Then music swelled from inside the ballroom. The doors were closed, but not enough to block the DJ's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lauren and Aaron Brooks to the floor as we celebrate 10 years of marriage." Applause rolled through the building. For a moment, I stood under the covered walkway and listened. My sister was getting her first dance at my old reception. My parents had exactly what they had fought to keep: the ballroom, the guests, the cake, the anniversary program, the music, and now the contract. I could have walked back through those doors. I could have watched. I could have made sure everybody understood what had happened. Part of me wanted to, because there is a particular kind of anger that wants witnesses. Instead, I looked toward the garden. 73 people were gathering under the pavilion lights. My wedding flowers were being set on imperfect tables. Ryan's mother was helping a server straighten linens. Elise was directing somebody toward the bar. The whole thing looked less expensive, less polished, and far more like mine. Ryan held out his hand. I took it. Behind me, Lauren's anniversary dance began. I kept walking toward my wedding. At the time, I thought the hardest part had been deciding to lose $13,000. I had no idea that everyone inside that ballroom still believed the $63,000 they had just signed for would eventually become my problem again. The first thing I noticed once we stepped fully into the garden pavilion was how little anyone seemed to care that the chairs did not match. Half of them were the white ceremony chairs we had used on the lawn. The rest were darker wooden banquet chairs pulled from storage. The tables had been set quickly enough that some of the linens were not perfectly even, and the flowers had clearly been moved in a hurry. One arrangement still had a few blades of grass caught around the base from where it had stood near the ceremony aisle. The expensive ballroom would have looked better in photographs. The garden looked like a wedding people had actually worked to save. Claire's staff had done more than I thought was possible in less than an hour. They had extended the outdoor bar, moved heaters closer to the pavilion, and rearranged the existing cocktail tables so the 73 of us could sit down without looking like we were attending a corporate picnic. Dinner was no longer the plated menu Ryan and I had spent months debating. Instead, the kitchen sent out family-style platters using the food that could be redirected from the larger service, plus simpler sides they could produce quickly. The presentation was less formal, but I barely noticed. By then, the last thing I wanted was another carefully staged thing I had not asked for. People were kind enough not to make me explain myself the second I walked in. Ryan's parents hugged us. Elise handed me a glass of water, and one of Ryan's friends raised his drink and said, There are worse places to have dinner than this. That was about as much commentary as I could handle. I had expected questions, awkward looks, maybe people whispering about why half the wedding had suddenly moved outdoors. Instead, the people closest to us seemed to understand that if we wanted to talk about it, we would. The acoustic duo started playing near the edge of the pavilion. They had been hired for the ceremony and cocktail hour, and their equipment was simple enough to relocate without turning the garden into another production. One of the musicians asked if we still wanted our first dance. For a second, I almost said no. The idea of another announced dance made something tighten in my chest. Then Ryan looked at me and said, "Ours is still ours." He was right. We danced under string lights instead of crystal chandeliers. There was no spotlight. No one dimmed the room. Somebody's chair scraped loudly against the stone halfway through the song, and a gust of April air nearly blew one of the table cards into the garden. I remember all of that more clearly than I remember anything about the ballroom decor. Ryan held me close and did not ask whether I was still angry. He knew I was. He also knew that if we spent the rest of the night talking about my mother, she would still own the reception even from the building behind us. When the song ended, people applauded, and Ryan's sister, Megan, stood with a glass in her hand. She had not been scheduled to speak first. The original toast order had vanished along with the ballroom timeline, so she simply looked at us and said, "I guess we're improvising tonight." Everyone laughed, including me. Then she talked about Ryan as a kid, about the first time he brought me to dinner, and about how she knew we would make it because neither of us needed the other to become smaller in order to feel secure. That last line landed harder than she could have known. I looked down at my hands while she kept speaking. All evening I had been thinking about contracts, deposits, guest counts, menus, and who had approved what. It was easier to think in logistics because logistics had answers. But sitting there listening to Megan talk about the kind of marriage Ryan and I had built, I understood why I had been willing to spend almost $13,000 to leave the ballroom. It was not because an anniversary cake offended me. It was because I had just promised to build a life with someone who respected my choices, and I was not going to spend the first night of that marriage proving to my mother that my choices could still be ignored if she created enough social pressure around them. After Megan finished, one of my cousins stood up and gave an unplanned toast. Then Ryan's father said a few words. None of them were polished. One person forgot how long Ryan and I had been together and guessed wrong by 2 years. Someone else made a joke that made no sense unless you had known me in college. It was imperfect and deeply ours. My phone, meanwhile, kept vibrating inside my small bridal bag. At first, I ignored it. Then Elise noticed the bag moving against the chair and asked, "Do you want me to turn that thing off?" I probably should. You absolutely should. I pulled it out long enough to see the screen. There were messages from people still inside the ballroom. Some were confused. Some were apologetic. One aunt wrote, "I didn't realize what was happening until after you left." A distant cousin asked whether she and her husband should come outside. 2 family friends wanted to know if there was room. Another message simply said, "Your mother is telling people you overreacted." I locked the phone. Elise held out her hand. "Give it to me. I'm 39 years old. And tonight you apparently need a babysitter for your phone." I handed it over. She tucked it into her purse. "I'll give it back when you're capable of making bad decisions again." I laughed, and the strange thing was that I meant it. A few hours earlier, I would have believed I needed to know exactly who stayed in the ballroom and who came to the garden. Who understood? Who believed Mom? Who thought I had caused the problem? Once I was sitting outside with the people I had chosen, that information started feeling less urgent. Not everyone I loved had come with us. That hurt. My parents obviously stayed inside. Lauren and Aaron stayed inside. A few relatives who had known me my entire life stayed there too, either because they were already eating or because Mom had given them a version of events where moving outside looked like some dramatic punishment. I did not send anyone back to collect them. I did not ask mutual relatives to explain me. For once, I let adults decide what they wanted to do with the information they had. About an hour into dinner, Lauren appeared at the edge of the pavilion. She had thrown a light wrap over her champagne dress, but the dress still looked like what it was, something chosen for an anniversary celebration. She stood there for several seconds before walking toward my table. Aaron was not with her. Ryan saw her coming and leaned toward me. "Want me here?" "Yes." He stayed seated. Lauren stopped beside us. "Can I talk to you?" "You are." She looked around at the people sitting nearby. Privately, I stood, and Ryan stood too. We moved a short distance beyond the pavilion where we could still see everyone but were not close enough for the nearest table to hear every word. The grass was damp from the afternoon, and Lauren crossed her arms against the cold. "You made everyone think I stole your wedding," she said. I stared at her. "I haven't told everyone anything." "You moved the reception." "Yes. And now people are looking at me like I did something terrible." I felt my temper rise, but I kept my voice level. "Did you want me to stay in the ballroom so people wouldn't look at you differently?" "That's not what I said. It's what you're asking." Lauren shook her head. "You could have talked to me before doing all of this." "I did talk to you. For 2 minutes while you were furious. I asked whether you knew about the dance, cake, and slideshow. You did. Because Mom told me you planned it." That was the same defense she had used before. Maybe it was true. I still did not know. What bothered me was how prepared she had been for a surprise she supposedly thought I had arranged. "You brought an anniversary dress." Her face changed. "Mom told me to bring something nicer for later." "You knew the song. Aaron and I have had the same anniversary song for 10 years, Sarah. That doesn't prove anything." "I didn't say it did." "Then stop looking at me like I was in some secret meeting planning to take your wedding." I took a breath. "I'm trying to understand what you knew." "I knew Mom said you wanted to make the anniversary special. I knew there was going to be a cake and a dance. I didn't know you were going to lose your mind over it." There it was again. Not, "I didn't know you said no." Not, "I thought you specifically approved everything." She was still describing my reaction as the unexpected part. "I didn't lose my mind. You moved 70 people outside on your wedding day." 73. Lauren threw up her hands. "That's exactly what I mean. You're acting like this is a project. I'm acting like it was my wedding. And it was still your wedding. Nobody was taking that away." I looked back at the pavilion. Ryan's father was laughing with one of my coworkers. Megan was helping a server carry empty platters toward the edge of the service area even though no one had asked her to. My dress hem had picked up dirt from the garden. The reception did not look anything like the one in our original photographs or planning documents. It felt more like mine than the ballroom had. "You don't get to tell me what was taken from me," I said. Lauren's expression softened slightly. "I'm not trying to fight with you." "Then don't." "Mom is upset." "I know." "Dad is upset." "I know. And everybody inside thinks you're punishing us." "That sounds like something they can think." She stared at me. "You really don't care?" That hurt more than I expected. Of course I cared. I cared enough that my stomach had been tight all evening. I cared that my parents were inside celebrating my sister while I sat outside at my own wedding. I cared that people who had known me since childhood might believe I had thrown a tantrum. I cared that Lauren was standing in front of me looking more worried about being blamed than about what had actually happened. But one of my worst habits had always been confusing, caring with responsibility. "I care," I said. "I'm just not going back inside to fix how everyone feels." Lauren looked away toward the ballroom. "I really thought you knew," she said. For the first time, there was something in her voice that sounded less defensive. I studied her. "Then you should probably figure out exactly what Mom told you." She looked back at me quickly. That was another small thing I remembered later. Not because she confessed anything. She did not. But for 1 second, my suggestion seemed to make her nervous. Then she said, "I should go." "Okay." She hesitated as though she expected me to stop her. I did not. She walked back toward the building alone. Ryan waited until she was out of earshot before saying, "Do you believe her?" "I believe Mom told her some version where I approved more than I did." That wasn't what I asked. I looked at him. "I don't know yet." He nodded. "Fair." We went back to dinner. For the next couple of hours, I made a deliberate decision not to investigate my family at my wedding. That sounds obvious when I say it now, but it did not feel obvious at the time. My brain kept trying to solve things. Why had Lauren looked nervous? How many people inside knew? What was Dad telling relatives? How long would Mom keep the ballroom running? Had she read the substitute host agreement closely enough to understand the $63,000 balance? Every time those questions surfaced, I reminded myself that none of them required an answer that night. Ryan and I cut our wedding cake outside. The original cake was smaller than the anniversary cake Mom had arranged because ours had been designed for display with additional sheet cake served from the kitchen. Claire's staff managed to bring enough of it outside for everyone. We fed each other normal bites because neither of us had ever understood why smashing frosting into someone's face was romantic. Someone took pictures. I danced with Ryan again. I danced with my father-in-law. I even danced badly with Elise after she informed me that if I had spent $5,000 extra on a garden reception, I was required to use the dance floor. At some point, several of the relatives who had remained inside came out to say goodbye. Most were careful about what they said. One aunt hugged me and whispered, "I wish I'd understood sooner." I told her it was okay. Another relative asked whether I had really canceled the ballroom on my parents. I answered, they chose to keep it, and left it there. I was not going to explain a contract in my wedding dress. My mother tried twice more to pull me back inside. The first message came while we were eating cake. Elise returned my phone because Mom had called repeatedly and she thought there might be an emergency. There was not. Mom's text read, "We are doing family photos in 15 minutes. You and Ryan need to come back." I wrote, "We're staying at our reception." She replied immediately, "Your grandmother is waiting." My grandmother had died 4 years earlier, which showed me just how quickly Mom was typing. A few seconds later, she corrected herself. "Your aunt and the rest of the family are waiting." I nearly laughed despite myself. Then another message appeared. "Do not punish Lauren by refusing family photos." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then typed, "I'm not returning to the ballroom tonight. Please enjoy the event you chose to keep." I sent it and handed the phone back to Elise. The second attempt came through Dad. He called just after 9. I answered because, unlike Mom, Dad had not called me repeatedly. "Sarah." "Hi, Dad. You're really not coming back in for pictures?" "No." He sighed. "Your mother is making this worse." I almost told him that sentence described most of the day, but I stopped myself. "Then talk to her. She's upset." "I know. She thinks you're doing this to make a point." I moved because I wanted my wedding somewhere else. "Same thing." "No, Dad. It isn't." There was a pause. Then he said, "We'll talk tomorrow." "Not tomorrow." "When?" "I don't know yet." He sounded irritated. "We can't just leave things like this." I looked at Ryan across the pavilion. He was talking to one of our friends, smiling at something I could not hear. "For tonight," I said, "we can." I ended the call. That might have been the smallest boundary I set all day, but it felt different from the contract. I was not transferring money. I was not moving guests. I was simply refusing to let my parents decide that because they were uncomfortable, I had to become available. By 10:30, the garden reception was winding down. The air had cooled enough that everyone was clustering near the heaters. My feet hurt. My hair had given up on whatever the stylist had done to it. Ryan's tie was loose, my dress was dirty around the bottom, and the expensive shoes I had insisted I could wear all night were sitting under my chair. I was happy. Not because the day had gone well. It had not. I was happy because the disaster had not been allowed to become the entire day. When Ryan and I finally walked toward the car, I could still see the ballroom windows glowing across the property. Music was coming through the old stone walls. The event inside was still running. Mom and Dad had kept the room exactly the way they had wanted. Lauren had gotten her cake, her guests, her slideshow, and her first dance. I had my executed agreement folded inside the overnight bag in our car. The ballroom was no longer mine. That mattered more than I understood at the time. Ryan opened the passenger door for me, then looked back toward the estate. "You want to know what's happening in there?" I followed his gaze. For maybe 3 seconds, I did. Then I shook my head. "No." He smiled. Good answer. We left. The next day, I did almost nothing related to my family. Ryan and I slept late, ate breakfast in the hotel room, opened a few wedding cards, and ignored our phones more than responsible adults probably should. There were messages waiting from relatives, but nothing that could not wait. Claire had already emailed copies of the signed documents to everyone involved, including the confirmation that Mom and Dad had replaced me as the ballroom hosts. I glanced at my copy once, confirmed that the venue had countersigned it, and removed my payment authorization, then closed the email. The final ballroom invoice was scheduled to go out after the venue reconciled the bar and service totals on the next business day. That was Monday. At a little after 10 that morning, my phone rang. Mom. I let it ring twice before answering. Hi. She did not say hello. What did you do? I sat up straighter. Ryan looked over from across the room. About what? There was a sharp breath on the other end. The venue sent us a bill for $63,000. I looked at Ryan. Then I said, Yes. Mom's voice rose. That is still your bill. For a second, I honestly thought I had heard her wrong. Not because the sentence was complicated, but because the paperwork was so clear that I could not understand how she expected me to respond. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed with my phone against my ear and looked at Ryan. He could not hear Mom's words, but he could see enough from my face to know what kind of call it was. No, I said. It was the remaining ballroom balance. You chose to keep the ballroom. Mom made a sharp sound. We kept it because you walked out in the middle of your own wedding reception. I moved my wedding reception. You abandoned a room full of people. You had an anniversary party running in it. It was your wedding first. Exactly. She ignored that. Do you have any idea what that invoice says? I have my copy of the agreement. That is not what I asked. Then yes. I know what it says. There was a pause, and when Mom spoke again, her voice had changed. The outrage was still there, but underneath it was something closer to panic. $63,000, Sarah. They expect us to pay $63,000. I know. You say that like it's nothing. It isn't nothing. Then fix it. Those two words told me more than the rest of the call. Not explain it. Not help me understand it. Fix it. That was the family language I knew best. Mom, there's nothing for me to fix. You created this. No. You decided to keep the ballroom after the venue told you what it would cost. We didn't have a choice. Yes, you did. Daniel told you that directly. We had 150 people sitting there. You had a choice. Lauren was in the middle of her anniversary. You had a choice. You were already outside with half the guests. You still had a choice. She raised her voice. Do you hear yourself? You knew exactly what would happen if we said no. The room would shut down. Everyone would be humiliated. Your sister would be humiliated. Your father and I would be humiliated. I leaned back against the headboard and closed my eyes. There it was again. The thing my family had always treated as more expensive than money. Embarrassment. They could spend my time to avoid it. They could spend my patience to avoid it. They could apparently spend $63,000 to avoid it. But somehow, when the invoice arrived, the cost became mine again. I understand why you signed, I said. That doesn't make the bill mine. You knew we couldn't just stop the event. I knew you didn't want to. That is the same thing. No, it really isn't. Ryan crossed the room and set a cup of coffee beside me. He did not ask what Mom was saying. He just sat in the chair opposite the bed and waited. Mom went quiet for several seconds. Then she tried another approach. You have savings. I looked at the phone. What? You and Ryan have savings. You've said that yourself. I could feel something cold settle in my chest. You're asking me to pay it? I'm asking you to take responsibility for your wedding. I already did. I paid for the wedding I actually had. That ballroom was booked for you. And then you signed to keep it for Lauren. Do not bring your sister into this. She was the anniversary being celebrated. She did not force you to walk outside. And I did not force you to sign. Mom exhaled hard. You are being unbelievably cold. I looked at Ryan. He was watching me, not with alarm, just with attention. I had spent years being told that calmness was one of my best qualities. Apparently, calmness only counted as a virtue when I was using it to make other people comfortable. I'm not going to argue about the same thing all morning, I said. The venue has the signed agreement. So do you. So do I. You're really going to leave us with this? No, you took it. She hung up. I sat there with the phone still pressed to my ear for another second before lowering it. Ryan waited. She wants me to pay. I figured. She said I have savings. His eyebrows rose slightly. That didn't take long. I put the phone on the nightstand. Apparently my savings are family property now. Ryan did not answer immediately. He knew when sarcasm was covering something else. Finally he asked, "Do you think this is over?" No. It was not. Dad called 40 minutes later. Unlike Mom, he began with, "How are you?" That almost made the call harder. "I'm fine. How's Ryan?" "He's fine." "Good?" Then silence. My father had spent most of his life hoping that if he waited long enough, someone else would say the uncomfortable sentence first. I let him wait. Finally, he sighed. "Your mother is very upset." "I know." "She called you?" "Yes." I told her she shouldn't have started the conversation angry. I almost smiled. That was Dad's specialty. Not questioning the demand. Questioning the tone. "What do you want, Dad?" Another pause. "We need to figure out the venue situation." "There isn't a venue situation. Sarah, the agreement is executed." "I know what the agreement says." "Then what are we figuring out?" He lowered his voice. "Your mother made a mistake." I looked out the hotel window. "Which one?" "That isn't helpful." "I'm serious. She should not have changed the reception without making sure you were completely on board." "That's one way to phrase it. Can you stop doing that?" "Doing what?" Turning every sentence into a cross-examination. I felt my jaw tighten. "I'm not cross-examining you, I'm asking what you want." Dad was quiet. Then he said it. "Don't punish both of us for something your mother did." I sat up straighter. "You signed too." "I signed because somebody had to deal with the situation." "No. Somebody didn't have to. Daniel told both of you that. Your mother was panicking, so you signed." "Yes." "Did anyone force you?" Silence. "Dad?" "No." That was the answer. I let it sit between us. He tried again. "I was trying to keep the night from becoming a disaster." "For who?" "Sarah, come on." "For who?" "I'm not doing this." "Then don't. But don't call me and tell me you had no choice." His voice hardened. "You have no idea what it was like in that room after you left." "You're right. I don't. I was at my wedding." That stopped him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Dad said, more quietly, "We can't comfortably pay this in 5 business days." I rubbed my forehead. "What are you asking me?" "We're talking to the venue about installments. That was the first time I heard about a payment plan. They may let us spread it out." "Okay." "Okay?" "I hope they do." He sounded almost offended. "That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Maybe that you understand this affects us." "I do understand. We may have to use part of our retirement savings." I closed my eyes. That landed. My parents were not poor. They owned their home, had retirement accounts, and had lived carefully enough that $63,000 would hurt them badly without destroying them. Dad had talked for 2 years about a long retirement trip he wanted to take with Mom once he fully stepped away from consulting work. They had a cushion. Not an endless one. And I knew exactly how much $63,000 could change those plans. "That's a lot of money," I said. "Yes, I know." "Then I don't understand how you can just sit there." I opened my eyes. I lost $8,000 walking out of that ballroom. Ryan and I paid almost $5,000 more to extend the garden. "I know what expensive feels like." "That was your choice." The words came out of his mouth before he could stop them. There was another silence. "Yes," I said, "it was." Dad did not answer. "And signing the ballroom was yours?" "That's not fair." "It's exactly fair." He exhaled slowly. "We'll talk later." "I don't think talking is going to change the contract." "I'm not talking about the contract." I knew what he meant. He was talking about me. About changing me. "I know," I said. After we hung up, I sat in the same place for several minutes. Ryan had gone downstairs to pick up breakfast because we had extended our hotel stay one extra day, and neither of us had any interest in rushing back into normal life. I opened my banking app. That was the part of this story I am least proud of. Not because I almost paid my parents' bill, but because the idea brought me relief. I did the math. Half of $63,000 was $31,500. I could pay it. Not without consequences. It would take a real bite out of the savings Ryan and I had been building toward a future house. It would weaken our emergency cushion. It would mean postponing things we had worked for. But I could do it. And for about 30 seconds, I imagined what would happen if I did. Mom would stop calling. Dad would soften. The family would probably call me generous. The wedding fight would shrink into an ugly memory everybody could pretend had been resolved. Lauren would not have to choose a side. I could buy peace. The thought felt familiar. Too familiar. That was when I realized what I was actually considering. Not helping my parents after an accident. Not helping them through illness. Not rescuing them from some event they could not control. I was considering paying them because they had ignored my written no, built the exact event I rejected, signed a contract to preserve it, and then discovered the consequence was uncomfortable. If I paid them, even half, my mother would learn that her plan had worked. Not exactly the way she intended, maybe, but close enough. She had believed I would rather pay than make a scene. I had already proved the second half wrong. Paying now would prove the first half right. I closed the banking app. When Ryan came back carrying coffee and breakfast sandwiches, I was still holding my phone. He set the food on the small table. You look like someone just showed you a spreadsheet. I was doing math. Dangerous. I could pay half. He stopped unpacking the food. Okay, that was all. Don't. Not, absolutely not. Just okay. I looked at him. That's it? What do you want me to say? I don't know. He sat across from me. Do you want to help them? I opened my mouth, then stopped. Ryan waited. I want this to stop. That wasn't my question. I hated him a little for how often he did that. I stared at the cup in front of me. No. He nodded. No, I don't want to help them pay for this. Then don't confuse wanting the pressure to stop with wanting to pay the bill. I leaned back. You make that sound simple. It is simple. That doesn't make it easy. We ate breakfast after that, and I did not reopen the banking app. Dad texted later that afternoon. We've asked the venue about a payment schedule. I know you're angry, but once this blows over, we'll figure out payment. I read the message twice. At the time, the word that bothered me was angry. As if anger were the only thing keeping me from paying. I did not understand the importance of we until later. I replied only, I hope the venue works out terms that are manageable for you. Dad did not answer. For most of the next day, my parents were quiet. It felt suspiciously peaceful. Ryan and I checked out of the hotel, went home, unpacked half our things, abandoned the other half in the hallway, and spent an embarrassing amount of time eating leftover wedding cake directly from the refrigerator. I thought maybe Mom and Dad had finally accepted that the contract was what it was. I should have known better. Tuesday afternoon, my Aunt Diane texted me. Diane was my mother's older sister. We were not especially close, but she had attended the wedding and had stayed in the ballroom after I moved outside. Her message read, I don't want to interfere, but I heard you left your parents with $63,000 of your wedding expenses. Is that really what happened? I stared at the screen. Not Lauren's anniversary expenses. Not the ballroom they chose to keep. My wedding expenses. I typed an answer, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Ryan was working at the dining room table. He noticed me standing motionless in the kitchen. What? I handed him the phone. He read it. Your mom? Who else? He handed it back. You going to answer? I don't know yet. Another message came in before I decided. This one was from a cousin. Hey, not trying to get involved, but your mom is really upset. She says you canceled your reception after everything was already ordered and made them take over the bill. That version was cleverer because every sentence contained enough truth to survive casual scrutiny. I had moved the reception. Everything had already been ordered. My parents had taken over the bill. What disappeared was why. The anniversary program. The written no. The first dance. The cake. The 24 anniversary guests. The fact that the venue had specifically told my parents they did not have to sign. Mom did not need to invent a completely false story. She only needed to remove the facts that made mine make sense. By evening, I had 4 messages. One person asked, honestly, what happened? One told me family mattered more than money. One said my parents were getting older and I should reconsider before doing permanent damage over a wedding. I did not answer any of them. Not yet. I knew exactly how easy it would be to send the toast-only email. I had the packing slip photo. I had my executed copy of the substitute host agreement. The facts were sitting on my phone. But I also knew how quickly family conflict could become a courtroom where everybody thought they were entitled to cross-examine the people involved. I did not want that. For the first time in my life, I had gotten married. I wanted at least a few days where my marriage was more interesting to me than my mother's reaction to it. Then Mom posted in the family group chat. We never imagined our daughter would punish us financially over a wedding disagreement. We love Sarah, but what happened has put us in an incredibly difficult position, and we are trying to deal with it privately. I actually laughed when I reached the word privately. Ryan looked over. She posted? I nodded. Messages started appearing beneath hers. An aunt wrote, I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. A cousin said, families have disagreements, but $63,000 is extreme. Someone else wrote that everyone needed to calm down and remember we loved each other. Then Lauren joined the conversation. For several seconds, the little typing indicator appeared and disappeared beside her name. Finally, her message arrived. I wish everyone knew the whole story. I stared at it. That sentence could have meant she was defending me. It could have meant she was defending herself. It could have meant she thought Mom had left out something I did not know. I read it again. Ryan leaned over my shoulder. What do you think that means? I locked the phone and set it face down on the table. So do I. By Wednesday morning, my mother's version of the wedding had started traveling faster than anything I had actually said. The family group chat was bad enough. But private messages were worse because they came wrapped in concern. Aunt Diane called me before 9. She began by saying she was not choosing sides, which usually meant she had already chosen one, and wanted credit for sounding neutral. I just think $63,000 is too much money to let a family argument destroy relationships over, she said. I was standing in my kitchen in socks, waiting for coffee to finish brewing, and for a second I wondered whether she heard herself. The $63,000 had apparently become something I had introduced into the conflict, like I had walked into the ballroom carrying an invoice and slapped it onto my parents' table. I didn't set the price, I said. I know, but it was your venue. It was my ballroom reception, until Mom and Dad signed to keep it after I left. Diane sighed. Your mother says she thought you would all sort it out after the wedding. That part is probably true. Then maybe everyone needs to cool down. I looked at the coffee dripping into the pot. I'm not the one calling relatives. There was a pause. I'm calling because I care about all of you. I know. And because your parents are really worried. I believe that too. Diane waited, probably expecting me to explain more. When I did not, she said, You've always been the practical one, Sarah. I just don't want pride to make this worse. That phrase stayed with me after we hung up. The practical one. The reasonable one. The one who could absorb a little more because I was supposedly better at carrying it. Nobody said, You've always been the practical one, so maybe your parents should listen when you put something in writing. Practicality only became my family role when somebody needed me to reduce the consequences of their choices. Not every relative came at me that way. My cousin Emily called that afternoon and said, I don't want Mom's version, Aunt Pat's version, or whatever people are repeating. Did you actually tell her she could do the anniversary thing? That was a fair question. I told her I had approved one toast and had specifically rejected a dance, a program, and a separate anniversary event. Emily was quiet for a second, then said, Okay, that changes it. She did not ask me to send proof. She did not tell me what I should do with the money. She just wanted the missing fact. Another relative sent a message that read, Family shouldn't split over money. I almost replied, Then Mom should not have spent $63,000 to avoid ending an anniversary party. I deleted it before sending. It was accurate, but accuracy was not the same as usefulness. Ryan asked that evening whether I wanted to put the documents in the family group. We were sitting on the couch surrounded by wedding cards we still had not finished opening. My toast-only email was saved. The photograph of the program packing slip was saved. The substitute host agreement was sitting in a folder on our dining table. I could have produced a clean timeline in 10 minutes. Not yet, I said. Why? Because I'm angry. He looked at me. You were angry when you moved the wedding. That was different. How? I had to make a decision. This would be an argument. He nodded slowly. I don't want to spend the week after our wedding presenting evidence to my relatives like I'm defending a dissertation. That sounds exhausting. It would also give Mom exactly what she wants. What does she want? An audience. Ryan leaned back against the couch. I thought she already had one. She has people reacting to her version. If I start responding to every person, then suddenly everybody gets a vote on whether my boundary was reasonable. And you don't want them to. I don't need them to. That was what I told myself. Anyway, the truth was that I still cared. I wanted my family to know I had not randomly abandoned my parents with a bill. I wanted people to understand that Mom had built the anniversary celebration after I said no. But there was a difference between wanting to be understood and being willing to surrender your peace until every last person agreed with you. I was trying to learn that difference in real time. Lauren called the next afternoon. Her name appeared on my phone while I was working from home. I almost let it go to voicemail, then changed my mind. The message she had posted in the family group, "I wish everyone knew the whole story," had been sitting in the back of my mind for 2 days. "Hi," I said. "Are you working?" "Yes." "I can call later." "No. What do you need?" She exhaled. "I don't need anything." I waited. Lauren hated silence almost as much as Dad did. She filled it quickly. "I just wanted to say I didn't ask Mom to do all of this." "I know." Another pause. "You know?" "Yes." Her voice sharpened. "Then why are you acting like I did?" "I'm not. You barely spoke to me after the wedding. I barely spoke to anyone after the wedding. You moved your reception and left me inside looking like I had stolen it. We already had that conversation. Well, I'm still dealing with it." I turned my chair away from the computer. "So am I. Mom is blaming you. Half the family is blaming Mom. Dad is miserable. Aaron doesn't want to be around any of them right now. And somehow everybody looks at me like I planned the whole thing." "I don't think you planned it." Lauren went quiet. I continued before she could turn that into absolution. "That doesn't mean I know what you knew." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means Mom told me you thought the anniversary was my surprise for you. But you knew about the cake. You knew about the dance. You had the dress. You knew enough about the program that I don't think you were surprised by much. I told you why. I know what you told me." Her voice took on the wounded tone she had used since we were teenagers, whenever a conversation stopped going her way. "So you think I'm lying?" "I think I don't have the whole story." "There you go." "What?" "Everything has to be an investigation with you." I almost laughed. Mom changed my wedding after I told her no, and now she's telling everyone I approved it. I think asking what happened is reasonable. You always do this. You turn everything into evidence, and you keep turning evidence into an insult. Because people don't talk to family like this. What should I say instead? Lauren hesitated. That was when she made the mistake. Mom told me you wouldn't stop it once everyone was there, so I thought even if you were annoyed, you were going to let it happen. For a second, I did not process the sentence. Then, every other sound in my office seemed to disappear. I sat up straight. "When did Mom tell you that?" Lauren did not answer. I asked again. "When did Mom tell you I wouldn't stop it once everyone was there?" "That's not the point." "It is absolutely the point. She said a lot of things." "When?" "Sarah, you told me at the wedding that Mom said this was my surprise for you." "That's what she told me at first." "At first." Lauren went silent. I could hear traffic faintly through her end of the call. I lowered my voice. "When did that change?" "It didn't change." "Yes, it did. If you thought I planned the anniversary, there would be no reason for Mom to tell you I wouldn't stop it once everyone was there. You're twisting what I said. No, I'm repeating it. She probably meant if you got stressed about the schedule. Lauren? What? When did she tell you? She sighed so loudly. I had to move the phone slightly away from my ear. A few days before the wedding. I stood up without meaning to. A few days. Yes. How many? I don't know. 4? 5? And what exactly did you know by then? I knew there was going to be more than a toast. How much more? I don't remember every detail. You remembered enough to bring a second dress. Mom told me to bring it. You knew there was a dance. Yes. The cake. Yes. The slideshow? Lauren did not answer immediately. Yes. I walked to the window. So, a few days before my wedding, you knew Mom had built a cake, dance, slideshow, and anniversary program around something I had supposedly planned as a surprise. I didn't know about every word in the program. That isn't what I asked. You're doing it again. I'm asking what you knew. I knew Mom was making it bigger, and you knew I might say no. Lauren snapped. I knew Mom thought you would be irritated. That is not the same thing. I didn't think you were going to move your entire wedding. There was the pattern again. My reaction was still being treated as the unexpected part. Did you know I had told Mom no to an anniversary dance? Silence. My stomach tightened. Lauren? I didn't know exactly what you had said. That's not what I asked. She sounded angry now. No, I didn't see your email. Did Mom tell you I had objected? She said you didn't want the anniversary taking over. I closed my eyes. That was enough. Not enough to know every detail. Not enough to make Lauren the architect. But enough to know I had not enthusiastically planned the thing she later claimed was my surprise. You knew I didn't want it taking over. She said you were being controlling. I almost smiled at the predictability of it. And you believed her? I believed you were stressed. That's Mom's answer. Maybe because it was true. I turned away from the window. Lauren, I was stressed about my wedding. That did not make my no imaginary. I didn't say it did. You didn't have to. You let everyone proceed like it did. I didn't organize it. I know. Then why are you blaming me? I'm asking why you didn't tell me. Lauren stopped talking. That was the first moment in the entire conversation when I felt like we had finally reached the real question. I waited. She did not answer. Why didn't you tell me? I don't know. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Were you afraid of Mom? That's not fair. Were you afraid the party would disappear? Her voice changed. Of course I liked the idea. There it was. Not evil. Not dramatic. Just honest enough to hurt. I mean, Sarah, it was our 10th anniversary. Aaron and I weren't doing anything huge. Mom kept saying everyone was already together and it would be nice. I thought you'd be annoyed for a little while. And then? What do you mean? And then I'd what? Lauren Sahil. You always get over things. I sat down again. There are sentences people say casually because they do not understand the confession hidden inside them. You always get over things. What Lauren meant was not that I forgave easily. She meant that my anger had never cost anyone enough to change their behavior. I had been reliable even while angry, available even while hurt, useful even after people disappointed me. I don't think I realized how much that sentence was going to bother me, I said. What sentence? You always get over things. That isn't an insult. No, I think that's the problem. Lauren groaned. I can't win with you. This isn't about winning. It feels like it. Then answer one thing. What? If you really thought Mom had told me everything and I had approved it, show me the messages. The silence on the line changed. Not empty this time. Heavy. What messages? The ones between you and Mom. Absolutely not. Why? Because they're private. You're telling me they prove Mom misled you. They do. Then show me. No. Okay. That answer caught her off guard. Okay? Yes. So that's it? That's it. You're just going to assume the worst? No. I'm going to stop arguing about information you don't want to share. Sarah, those are conversations between me and Mom, and you have every right to keep them private. Then why ask? Because you called me to tell me I was treating you unfairly. If you want me to change my understanding of what happened, I need more than trust me. That is so cold. I don't think it is. You never used to act like this." That sentence almost made me laugh. I had not become colder. I had simply stopped making other people's discomfort the deciding factor in every conversation. "You're right," I said. "I didn't." Lauren did not seem to know what to do with that. Finally, she said, "I have to go." "Okay." She hung up. For the next hour, I barely got any work done. I replayed the conversation in my head, even though I knew that was exactly the kind of thing I had promised myself I would stop doing. Lauren had known several days before the wedding that the anniversary plan had grown far beyond a toast. She knew Mom believed I might object. She knew enough to understand that I had not cheerfully designed the whole thing as some generous surprise. But I still did not know the line between what Mom had told her and what Lauren had chosen to believe, because it was convenient. That distinction mattered to me. I did not want to turn my sister into something worse than she was just because I was hurt. Ryan came home a little after 6 and found me chopping vegetables far more aggressively than necessary. "How was your day?" Lauren called. He put his keys down. "How bad?" She knew more than she said. He waited. A few days before the wedding, Mom told her I might object, but wouldn't stop at once. Everyone was there. Ryan's expression changed. She admitted that? She let it slip. "What else?" I asked for the messages. "And?" She said no. Ryan washed his hands at the sink. "Do you believe her?" "I believe Mom lied to her." "That wasn't what I asked." I gave him a look. He smiled slightly. "Sorry." "No, you're not." "No?" I put the knife down. I think Lauren wanted enough of Mom's version to be true that she didn't ask too many questions. That sounds possible. It also sounds like I'm making excuses for her. Maybe. Or maybe you don't know yet. That was the answer I needed. I did not know yet. At 8:17 that night, my phone buzzed, then buzzed again. And again. I looked down. Lauren. She had sent 3 screenshots. Then 4 more. Then 6. By the time the messages stopped, there were 23 images in the thread. Under them, she wrote, "Fine, read them." "You'll see this was Mom." I stared at the screen. Ryan was sitting beside me and glanced over. "You asked for those?" "Yes." I opened the first screenshot. The conversation was dated 5 days before the wedding. Lauren had written, "Sarah knows about all this?" I looked at the next message from Mom. Then I stopped. Whatever was in those screenshots, Lauren had sent them because she believed they would prove she was innocent. I had a feeling they were about to prove something else. I opened the first screenshot again and forced myself to read slowly instead of jumping to whatever I thought would hurt most. The conversation had started 5 days before the wedding. Lauren had sent Mom a picture of the champagne dress she eventually wore at the reception and asked whether it was too much. Mom replied that it was perfect for later. Lauren asked what later meant, and Mom told her not to worry because everything was being handled. Then came the message I had already seen at the bottom of the screen. "Sarah knows about all this?" Lauren had asked. Mom's answer was short. "She knows enough. She'll be fine." I scrolled to the next image. Lauren wrote, "That's not what I asked." Mom replied, "She agreed to the anniversary. She's just being fussy about details because she's stressed." Lauren asked whether I knew about the dance. Mom answered, "She said she didn't want anything taking over, but she'll get over it once she sees everyone having a good time." I stopped there and read that sentence twice. Mom had not told Lauren I had approved the dance. She had told her I objected, and then reclassified my objection as stress. Ryan was beside me, but he did not ask to see the phone. "Bad?" he said. "Keep going bad." I opened the next screenshot. Lauren had written, "What if she says no when she sees it?" Mom replied almost immediately. "She won't embarrass you in front of everyone." Lauren answered, "You don't know that." Mom wrote, "I know my daughter." Then came the sentence I had not known existed. Lauren, "Yeah, she'd rather pay than make a scene." I stopped breathing for a second. It was not dramatic. Nobody had called me stupid. Nobody had said they hated me. That might have been easier. Instead, my mother and sister had reduced me to a predictable behavior pattern. Put Sarah in a room full of people. Make undoing the situation expensive and embarrassing. She will absorb the cost because that is what Sarah does. Ryan saw my face change. "What?" I turned the phone toward him. He read the exchange and did not speak for several seconds. Then he handed it back carefully, as though the phone itself had become something sharp. That's what they were counting on. I nodded. The remaining screenshots were not kinder. They were not all cruel either, which somehow made them worse. Lauren asked practical questions about the anniversary cake and whether Aaron needed to know everything in advance. Mom told her to let Aaron think I had approved the plan so he would not make it awkward. Lauren asked how long the slideshow was. Mom said 6 minutes. Lauren complained that the anniversary dance should happen before dinner because some of their friends might leave early. At one point, Lauren wrote, "I still think Sarah's going to be pissed." Mom replied, "She'll survive one night not being the center of attention." That sentence actually made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was so perfectly backwards that anger briefly became absurdity. Ryan looked at me. "You okay?" "No." "Want me to stop asking that?" "Yes." "Okay." I kept reading. Lauren had not planned the takeover. That part was true. She had not ordered the programs. She had not dealt with the venue. She had not designed the slideshow or chosen which of my parents' guest seats would go to her friends. Mom had done the work, but by 5 days before my wedding, Lauren knew there would be a cake, a dance, a slideshow, anniversary guests, and some kind of printed program. She also knew I had objected to the anniversary taking over, and she stayed quiet, not because she thought I had fully approved it, because she thought I would tolerate it. There was a difference. I went back to the message that bothered me most. She'd rather pay than make a scene. I had spent almost $13,000 proving that sentence wrong on my wedding day. Yet reading it still felt like discovering a debt I did not know I owed. Ryan said, "She sent these to prove your mom was responsible." I know. She probably didn't realize what she was giving you. I think she realized Mom looks worse. That's not the same thing. No? I set the phone face down on the coffee table. There was a strange relief in finally knowing. For days, I had been trying to separate what Lauren had been told from what she had chosen. The screenshots answered enough of that question that I did not have to keep guessing. Mom had lied to her, but Lauren had learned the lie was incomplete. Then she had chosen the version that benefited her. That was the part I could not excuse. I called her the next morning. She answered on the second ring. "Did you read them?" "Yes." A beat of silence. "So you see what I mean." "I see that Mom planned it." "Exactly. I already knew that." Lauren sounded confused. "Then what are we arguing about?" "We're not arguing about who ordered the programs. Sarah, every one of those messages shows Mom was driving this." "I know." "Then why do you sound like you're still mad at me?" I stood at my kitchen counter and looked out the window. I wanted to choose the sentence carefully, because if I said too much, Lauren would find the weakest phrase and defend against that instead of the actual point. "You keep telling me you didn't plan it," I said. "I know you didn't." "Okay. You didn't order the programs." "No." "You didn't deal with the venue." "No." "You didn't create the whole plan." "No." "So I'm not blaming you for creating it." "Then what are you blaming me for?" "Finding out." Silence. I continued. "You found out I wasn't okay with it." "That is not what the messages say. They say Mom told you I didn't want the anniversary taking over. She said you were stressed, and you asked what would happen if I said no." Another silence. "That means you knew no was possible. Anybody can say no to anything." "Lauren." "What?" "You wrote that I would rather pay than make a scene." She did not answer. I waited. When she finally spoke, her voice was defensive again. "It was a stupid text. It was an accurate prediction." "I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" "I meant you hate public drama." "I do." "You always have." "That doesn't make my money available to whoever can embarrass me enough." "I never said it did." "You assumed it." "No, I didn't." "Then explain the sentence." Lauren sighed. "You're making one line into something huge." "No, I'm making the entire wedding into what it was. That line just explains why nobody thought they had to stop." She was quiet for several seconds. Then she said, "Mom told me you'd get over it." "I know." I believed her. "I know. I didn't think you would move the reception." "I know." "Then what do you want from me?" That question irritated me more than I expected. I'm not asking you for anything. That's not true. You clearly want me to say something. What I wanted was for you to warn me 5 days before my wedding. I can't go back and do that. No? So what am I supposed to do now? There it was again. The reflex to hand me the problem. I almost answered automatically. I almost told her how to talk to Mom. What she should say. How she could apologize. What I needed to hear. Then I stopped. Now you handle your relationship with Mom, I said. I'll handle mine. Lauren's tone changed. What does that mean? It means I'm not going to manage this for everybody. So that's it? For now. You're just cutting me off? I didn't say that. It sounds like it. I'm saying I don't trust you the way I did before the wedding. Her breathing became audible through the phone. That is so unfair. Why? Because I did not do this to you. You benefited from it after you knew I might not agree. That is not the same thing as doing it. I know. Then stop acting like I'm Mom. I'm not. You are. No? If I thought you were Mom, this conversation would be much shorter. That stopped her. I softened my voice slightly, not because the truth had changed, but because I did not want cruelty to become confused with strength. I know she put you in the middle, I said. I know she told you pieces that made me sound unreasonable. I know she built the thing. But you got enough information to know I wasn't freely giving you that anniversary party, and instead of calling me, you decided I would probably tolerate it. Lauren sniffed. I didn't think it would hurt you this much. That doesn't help. I'm trying to explain. I know. I really did think you'd be annoyed for a few days, and then everything would go back to normal. I closed my eyes. That's exactly the problem. What? You thought normal meant I'd keep being useful after you ignored me. I never said that. You didn't have to. She started crying then. Not dramatically. I heard her breathing change and a quiet sound like she had moved the phone away from her face. A few years earlier, that would have ended the conversation. Lauren cried, and I softened. Mom became upset, and I solved. Dad sounded tired, and I took something off his plate. It was not because any of them were evil masterminds. It was because we had practiced the same roles for so long that none of us had to say them out loud anymore. I let Lauren cry. Not as punishment, because her feelings were allowed to exist without becoming an instruction for me. After a while, she said, I'm sorry. I waited. I'm sorry Mom did this. There it was. Not yet. I believe you. That's all you're going to say? Yes. She sounded frustrated. What kind of apology do you want? One that isn't about what Mom did. Lauren stopped talking. I did not give her the answer. Eventually, she said, I have to go. Okay. When the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. People talk about betrayal as if the worst version is discovering someone hates you. Sometimes the harder version is discovering they love you while still being perfectly willing to let you absorb damage because they believe you can take it. That afternoon, I opened Dad's message from a few days earlier. I know you're angry, but once this blows over, we'll figure out payment. I stared at the word we. When I first received it, I assumed he meant he and Mom would work something out with the venue. Now I was not so sure. Mom had clearly believed I would eventually pay. Lauren had believed I would tolerate the expense rather than create public conflict. What exactly had Dad believed when he signed? I did not know. That distinction mattered. I had learned enough in the last week not to turn suspicion into fact just because it fit the pattern. Dad had signed the agreement after Daniel told him he could walk away. That much I had witnessed. He knew the amount. He knew I was being released. But I did not yet know whether he had genuinely intended to pay or whether he had been betting on me from the beginning. I did not call him. For once I let a question remain unanswered until I had something better than instinct. The family group chat stayed mostly quiet for 2 days. Mom had apparently decided silence was more dignified than continuing to argue where people could screenshot her. A few relatives sent private messages to me, but I answered only the ones that contained genuine questions. When someone asked whether I had approved the anniversary, I said no. When someone asked whether mom and dad had signed the ballroom, I said yes. When someone asked whether I was going to help them pay, I said no. I did not send the text chain. Not yet. Those messages involved Lauren too. And although I was angry at her, I had no interest in turning her private failure into entertainment for 30 relatives just because mom was being difficult. There was a difference between evidence and ammunition. I was trying very hard not to confuse them. Then my cousin Emily sent me a screenshot. It was not from the family group. Mom had apparently created a smaller thread with a few relatives who had stayed in the ballroom. Her message read, "Sarah knew about Lauren's anniversary from the beginning. She approved it, and then changed her mind after she saw the program. We signed the ballroom because she walked out at the last minute and left us no reasonable choice." I read it once. Then again. The anger I felt was different this time. Cleaner. Mom was no longer saying we had different interpretations. She was saying something demonstrably false. I had told her no in writing 3 weeks before the wedding. She had ordered the program afterward. She had the email. I had the email. She knew exactly what I had approved. Ryan came into the kitchen carrying groceries and found me standing with my phone in my hand. "What now?" I showed him the screenshot. He read it, then set the grocery bag on the counter. "That's new." "Yes." "Going to answer?" I looked toward the dining table where the folder from the venue was still sitting. Inside it was the signed substitute host agreement. On my phone was the March email. Claire had sent me the photograph of the packing slip. Lauren had voluntarily sent me the text proving mom knew I might object. Until that moment, I had treated those things as information for myself. Mom had just changed their purpose. "I think I have to," Ryan nodded. "What are you going to send?" "Not everything." "Good." I opened my laptop. The easiest thing would have been to dump all 23 screenshots into the family chat and let everyone pick through them. I could have posted every message where mom called me controlling. Every place Lauren admitted she liked the anniversary idea. Every line that made them look selfish. I did not. I selected the March email, where I approved one toast and rejected everything else. Then, the packing slip showing mom ordered anniversary programs 12 days before the wedding. Then the page of the substitute host agreement showing that mom and dad voluntarily assumed the ballroom and that I was released from the remaining balance. I hesitated over Lauren's texts. The entire chain was unnecessary. One small section was enough. I messaged Lauren first. "Mom is now telling relatives I approved the anniversary and changed my mind after I saw the program. I'm going to correct that. I plan to use the part of your messages where you ask what happens if I say no, and mom says I won't stop it publicly. I'll redact everything unrelated." Lauren called me immediately. "Do you have to use my messages?" "I can prove I said no without them." "Then don't. But mom is also telling people she thought I had approved everything. Your messages prove she knew that wasn't true." Lauren said nothing. "I'm not posting the whole conversation. People are going to think I'm horrible." I closed my eyes. "That's not my goal." "Then why include me?" "Because you were part of the conversation where mom admitted she knew I might say no. This is exactly what I was afraid of." "What?" "Being dragged into this." I almost laughed. "You were already in it, Lauren. That's not fair. You knew about the event 5 days before my wedding. I already apologized. You apologized that mom did it." Silence. I continued. "I'm not asking the family to punish you. I'm correcting a specific lie mom is telling about me." Lauren's voice softened. "Can you leave out the line about paying?" I looked at the screenshot. She'd rather pay than make a scene. That line mattered emotionally to me more than it mattered factually to the family accusation. I did not need it to prove mom lied about my approval. "Yes," I said. "I can leave that out." Lauren sounded surprised. "Really?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I'm trying to correct what mom said, not destroy you." She was quiet for a moment. "Thank you." I did not say, "You're welcome." After we hung up, I cropped the screenshot to show only the relevant exchange. "Lauren, what if she says no?" "Mom, she won't embarrass you in front of everyone." That was enough. I redacted email addresses, payment details, account information, and anything unrelated. Then I looked at the 4 images together. They did not scream. They did not speculate. They just lined up. I had said no. Mom ordered the program anyway. Mom knew I might object. Mom and Dad signed the ballroom after I left. That was the story. The next morning, before I could decide whether to post it, Mom made the decision for me. A cousin forwarded another message. This time Mom had written, "Sarah is allowing everyone to think we hijacked her wedding when she was involved in the anniversary plan from the start." I stared at the sentence. That was no longer omission. That was a lie. I opened the family group chat. For weeks, Mom had been turning the conflict into something emotional enough that everybody could have an opinion. Whether I had overreacted, whether family should share, whether $63,000 was too much, whether I should forgive. She had finally narrowed the issue to one question that did not require opinion. Had I approved the anniversary and changed my mind later? No. And for the first time since the wedding, I did not need anyone to believe me because I was Sarah, the reliable daughter, the practical one, the person who usually told the truth. I had documents. I started typing. I typed the message 3 times before I sent it. The first version sounded angry. The second sounded like a legal memo. Neither was what I wanted. I was not trying to win an argument about whether my mother was a good person or whether I had been a good daughter. I was correcting one specific claim she had repeated often enough that relatives had started treating it as fact. In the end, I wrote, "Mom has told several people that I approved Lauren's anniversary celebration and changed my mind after I saw the program. That is not what happened. I approved one toast and specifically declined an anniversary dance, anniversary program, and separate anniversary event. These are the documents she left out. I'm correcting that claim once. I'm not going to argue about it afterward." Then I attached the first screenshot. It was the March email. My words were visible in full. A toast is fine, no anniversary dance, no anniversary program, and no separate anniversary event. Beneath it was Mom's response. Of course. I had cropped out our email addresses because nobody needed them. I had not highlighted anything or added arrows. The words were clear enough on their own. The second image was the photograph Claire had preserved from the anniversary program carton, Patricia Miller. Order date 12 days before the wedding. Custom anniversary programs. The date mattered more than anything else on that slip. Mom had not seen the ballroom on my wedding day, gotten carried away, and improvised a celebration in a burst of enthusiasm. She had ordered 100 printed programs almost 2 weeks before the wedding, after acknowledging my written limit. The third image was the relevant page from the substitute host agreement. I had covered account information and everything unrelated. What remained showed that I had withdrawn my wedding reception from the ballroom, that Mom and Dad had voluntarily replaced me as the continuing hosts, and that the venue released me from the remaining ballroom obligation once their replacement payment authorization was accepted. Their signatures were visible. So was Daniel's. The fourth image was the cropped section of Lauren's messages. I kept my promise and left out the sentence about me rather paying than making a scene. Nobody in the family needed to see that. I included only the part necessary to establish Mom's knowledge. Lauren had asked, "What if she says no?" Mom had replied, "She won't embarrass you in front of everyone." That was enough to show that Mom did not believe I had enthusiastically approved the whole anniversary plan. She had anticipated that I might refuse and counted on the timing to make refusal difficult. I looked at the 4 images one last time. Ryan was sitting across from me at the dining table, reading something on his laptop without pretending he was not waiting to see what I would do. "Sending it?" he asked. "Yes. You sure?" "No." He smiled faintly. "That hasn't stopped you lately." I sent the message. For perhaps 15 seconds, nothing happened. Then the typing indicators appeared. Aunt Diane was first. "Patricia, is this email real?" Mom did not answer immediately. Another cousin wrote, "I thought Sarah agreed to the anniversary." Then Aunt Carol, who had spent most of the week telling everyone that weddings were not worth destroying families over, wrote, "Pat, why were the programs ordered after Sarah said no?" I sat back from the table. It was strange how quickly the conversation changed once dates and signatures appeared. For days, people had been debating emotion. Was I angry? Was Mom embarrassed? Was Lauren hurt? Was $63,000 too harsh? Emotions are convenient in family arguments because everyone can have an opinion about someone else's. Documents were less flexible. Mom finally replied, "I cannot believe my own daughter is posting private family communications in a group chat." I read the message twice. Not, "That email is fake." Not, "That is not my order." Not, "I never signed that agreement." Private family communications. Ryan glanced at my screen. That was fast. I typed, "You made the accusation public." I almost added more, then stopped. Mom responded almost immediately. "This is exactly what I mean. You're trying to humiliate us instead of resolving this privately." I wrote, "I tried privately. I'm not discussing it further." Then I put the phone down. It buzzed again. And again. Ryan reached for his coffee. "You going to look?" "Not yet." That lasted maybe 30 seconds. I picked it up. A cousin I barely saw outside holidays had written, "I still think $63,000 is too much for parents to pay over one mistake, but the documents make it pretty clear Sarah didn't approve the anniversary." That was almost exactly the kind of reaction I expected. People did not suddenly become jurors who perfectly agreed with me just because I had evidence. Some still thought I should help my parents financially. Some believed family obligation existed beyond legal responsibility. I could disagree with them without pretending their opinion was irrational. Aunt Diane wrote, "This wasn't a misunderstanding if Sarah said no in writing." Someone else replied, "Pat thought she was doing something nice for Lauren. That doesn't make her a criminal." I nearly smiled. Nobody had called Mom a criminal. That was another family habit. When the facts became uncomfortable, somebody defended against an accusation no one had made. Then Uncle Greg entered the conversation. Greg was Dad's younger brother. He had stayed in the ballroom on the wedding night, mostly because he had been seated near Dad and apparently had not realized until much later why Ryan and I had left. He was not close enough to me to automatically take my side, which made his question more important. "Mike, did you know Sarah had not agreed to all of this before you signed the ballroom?" Dad did not answer. The chat stayed strangely quiet. Even Mom stopped typing. Then Dad wrote, "I knew Sarah was upset about the way things had been handled." Greg replied, "That isn't what I asked." I felt my stomach tighten. Until that moment, Dad had done what he always did best. He had occupied the middle. Mom had gone too far, but I had reacted too strongly. He had signed, but he had been trying to prevent a disaster. Everyone had made mistakes. Nobody was entirely responsible. Greg's question removed the middle. "Did you know she had not agreed?" Dad was typing. Then he stopped, then started again. Finally, one word appeared. "Yes." I stared at it. Ryan leaned toward me. "That's your dad?" "Yes." Wow. It should not have surprised me. I had been in the conference room when Dad learned the details. I had watched him read the agreement. I had watched Daniel tell him he did not have to sign. I already knew Dad understood by the time he took over the ballroom. But seeing him admit it to the family did something different. For the first time, he had not been allowed to describe himself as the man caught between two unreasonable women. He had made a choice, and now he had said so. Greg replied, "Then I think everyone needs to stop saying Sarah changed her mind after approving it." That message sat there for several minutes without response. Mom eventually wrote, "None of you were in that room dealing with the pressure we were under." Nobody answered immediately. I did not either. The temptation was there. I could have reminded her that Daniel had explicitly told them they could let the event stop. I could have reposted the agreement. I could have explained again that the pressure she was describing had been created by her own decision to stage an anniversary event inside my reception. Instead, I kept my promise. I had corrected the lie. I was not going to turn the rest of the day into a live trial. My phone started filling with private messages anyway. Some were apologies. One aunt wrote, "I should have asked you before assuming." I appreciated that more than any dramatic declaration of support. Another cousin said, "I still think you should consider helping your parents because this is a huge amount, but I understand now why you left." That was fine too. Understanding did not require agreement. A few messages were less generous. One relative told me I had weaponized paperwork against my own mother. I stared at that phrase for a full 10 seconds. Then I showed Ryan. He laughed. That's a new one. I work in operations. Apparently reading documents is now violence. He smiled. You're dangerous. I put the phone down again. The only person I wanted to hear from was Lauren. She had not said anything in the group. I wondered whether she was angry that I had used even the cropped portion of her messages. I had warned her. She had asked me to leave out the line about paying, and I had. Still, knowing a private conversation is going to be shown is different from watching relatives react to it. About an hour later, she texted me privately. Thanks for not posting the rest. I replied, I said I wouldn't. She sent back, Mom is furious with me. I looked at the words. Of course she was. Not because Lauren had invented anything, because she had provided the evidence Mom could no longer control. I typed, I'm sorry she's putting that on you. Lauren responded immediately. She says I betrayed her by sending you the screenshots. I did not know what to say to that. The truth was that Lauren had sent them to prove herself innocent. She had not sent them out of loyalty to me. But whatever her motive, Mom's reaction revealed something important. Patricia did not define betrayal by whether someone lied. She defined betrayal by whether someone stopped protecting her version of events. I wrote, You sent me a conversation you were part of. What you do with Mom about that is between you and her. Lauren did not answer. For the rest of the afternoon, the family group stayed quieter than it had been all week. Mom did not leave the chat, but she stopped responding. Dad did too. The absence was almost louder than the arguments had been. At dinner, Ryan asked, Do you feel better? I considered the question. Not really. Worse? No. So somewhere in the middle. I think I expected it to feel more satisfying. What part? People seeing it. Ryan put down his fork. You wanted them to believe you. I wanted them to stop repeating something false. Did they? Mostly. Then maybe that was the job. I looked at him. He shrugged. Doesn't mean the job has to feel good. That was probably why I had married him. I had spent so much of my life assuming resolution should feel like relief that I did not know what to do with a correct decision that still hurt. Later that night, I made the mistake of opening the group again. There were more than 80 unread messages. Some people were debating whether Mom's intentions mattered more than the outcome. Others were discussing whether parents should ever accept that much money from a daughter in the first place. Someone had started a side argument about whether anniversaries mattered as much as weddings, which had nothing to do with the actual problem. Uncle Greg had left the conversation after telling everyone he was not going to spend his evening litigating somebody else's marriage. I scrolled for maybe 30 seconds. Ryan was brushing his teeth when he came back into the bedroom and saw the phone in my hand. You said you weren't going to read all that. I'm not. You appear to be reading all that. I'm observing. He stared at me. Fine. I locked the screen. Why do you care what all of them think? He asked. I opened my mouth with several prepared answers. Because they are family. Because Mom lied. Because I do not want people thinking I abandoned my parents. Because reputation matters. All of them were true. None felt like the whole answer. Finally, I said, I think I'm used to being the one everyone thinks is reasonable. Ryan leaned against the dresser. And now? Now, half of them think I'm reasonable, and the other half think I'm cruel, but technically correct. That sounds very you. I threw a pillow at him. He laughed and caught it. Then I said, I don't want to need them to agree. He handed the pillow back. Then don't. I rolled my eyes. Your advice is always annoyingly short, because the hard part isn't understanding it. That was true. The next morning, I muted the family group. Not for an hour. Not until lunch. Indefinitely. The silence on my phone was immediate. I had not realized how often I had been checking it until there was nothing waiting for me. My body kept expecting vibration that did not come. By late afternoon, I felt lighter. Then Lauren called. I almost ignored it because I was in the middle of work, but something about the timing made me answer. Hi. She sounded exhausted. Do you have a minute? A few. Mom says if you won't help with the bill, I have to. I leaned back in my chair. What? She called me this morning. Then again at lunch. She says Dad is trying to work out the installments with the venue, but they're going to have to pull money they didn't plan to touch. I waited. Lauren continued. She says because the anniversary was for me and Aaron, I should contribute. There were several things I could have said. Some of them would have been deserved. I could have reminded her that she had enjoyed the cake, dance, guests, and slideshow, knowing I might object. I could have said that maybe she should pay. I could have told her this was what happened when you accepted a gift you knew somebody else had not freely given. Instead, I asked, "Did you sign the ballroom agreement?" "No." "Did you agree to pay for it?" "No." "Then you're not legally responsible for their contract." "I know that." "Okay." She sounded frustrated. "That's it? What do you want from me?" "I don't know." There was a long pause. Then Lauren said, "I told Mom I didn't agree to pay for any of this." Something about the sentence almost made me laugh, but I did not. "What did she say?" Lauren went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We're family." I closed my eyes. There it was. The same phrase. The same logic. The same invisible rule that had always meant somebody else could decide what you owed as long as they called the decision love. Only this time, I was not the person standing underneath it. Lauren's voice was still in my ear when I realized how easy it would have been to enjoy what was happening to her. For the first time in our adult lives, Mom had pointed the same machinery in Lauren's direction, the calls, the guilt, the insistence that someone else's financial problem had somehow become hers because family was involved. I could have said, "Now you know how it feels." I could have reminded her that she had enjoyed the anniversary cake, the first dance, the slideshow, and the friends' moms slipped into my guest list after Lauren already knew I might object. The sentence formed in my mind, but I did not say it. Lauren was responsible for what she had done. That did not mean I had to enjoy watching Mom do the same thing to her. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know. That's why I called you." "No. What do you want to do?" "I don't want to pay them." "Then tell Mom no." I did. "And?" "She won't accept it." I leaned back in my chair. "Then let her not accept it." Lauren went silent for several seconds. "What does that even mean?" "It means her disagreement doesn't automatically create a new decision for you. She keeps calling. You don't have to answer every time. She texts if I don't. You don't have to answer every text. She says Dad's stressed. She says they're moving money around they never planned to touch. She says the anniversary was for me, so I should help. I considered that. You did benefit from it. I know." Her answer surprised me. For most of the last month, Lauren had protected herself with one technically correct sentence. I didn't plan it. She had not ordered the programs, manipulated the venue portal, or signed the ballroom agreement. All true, but she had known enough 5 days before the wedding to ask what would happen if I said no, and she had chosen silence anyway. "You know?" I asked. "Yes, I liked the party. I liked having our friends there. I liked the dance. I know how awful that sounds now. It sounds honest. That doesn't mean Mom gets to call me and decide I owe her money." "No, it doesn't." She started by saying Aaron and I should pay half of 63,000. Yes. Then she said 15,000. Then 10. Now she says anything substantial would prove I care about Dad. I closed my eyes briefly. Mom was negotiating guilt as though it were a payment plan. What does Aaron think? He says we're not paying anything unless I decide I actually want to contribute. He thinks Mom's trying to charge us for a gift we never contracted for. That sounds reasonable. He also thinks I should stop answering her calls. That also sounds reasonable. Lauren sighed. Everybody is suddenly very good at telling me what to do. Then stop asking everyone what you should do. What am I supposed to ask? What you actually want. I want Mom to stop. That isn't something you control. Her silence this time was heavier. You make it sound simple. It isn't simple, but you're still trying to find a version of no that Mom will accept without being upset. She's my mother. I know. You don't care if she's angry with you anymore? I care. I just stopped treating her anger as evidence that my decision is wrong. Lauren said nothing. That was a distinction I had only recently learned myself. For years, I thought a conversation was unfinished until Mom felt better about my answer. If she kept objecting, I kept explaining. If she remained hurt, I softened. If she became angry, I searched for another compromise. I had confused clarity with persuasion. I thought a boundary was successful, only once the other person agreed it was fair. You don't need her to agree with your boundary, Lauren. She gave a tired laugh. I think I've always thought I did. So did I. The admission surprised both of us. Lauren was quiet, then said, I was going to ask you to call her. I know. You always used to. I know that too. She listens to you more than me. That's because she expects me to solve something. Lauren sighed. You usually do. Exactly. That conversation did not repair our relationship. I still had the screenshots. I still knew she had chosen a party over warning me, but for the first time, Lauren was dealing with Mom without simply handing the problem to me, and I was allowing her to do it. Over the next couple of weeks, she occasionally forwarded Mom's messages. They were rarely outrageous enough to look abusive on their own. That was part of why Mom's pressure worked so well. Your father barely slept last night. We're going to have to postpone our travel plans. I never thought I would have to ask my own children for help. Then there were the messages aimed directly at Lauren. It was your anniversary. Your sister has made her choice. I'm asking what kind of daughter you want to be. Even $5,000 would show your father you appreciate what we tried to do for you. The wording changed depending on who Mom needed to feel guilty. When she wanted me to tolerate the anniversary, it was only a small, harmless addition that took nothing away from my wedding. When she wanted Lauren to help pay for it, it suddenly became an enormous gift created specifically for Lauren. After one particularly long string of screenshots, I asked, Do you want me to know this, or do you want me to fix it? Lauren replied, Just letting you know. That became our rule. Sometimes she wanted advice. Sometimes she just needed somewhere to put the frustration. When she asked me how much I thought she should contribute, I refused to give her a number. You're good at this stuff, she complained. That's why I'm not doing it. What does that mean? If I decide what you owe, then you get to blame me later if you regret it. I wouldn't. You might not mean to, but this needs to be your decision. She was annoyed, but a week later she told me she had informed Mom she would not discuss money again until she had decided for herself whether she wanted to contribute anything. Mom hated that answer. Lauren survived. That was the point. Dad took longer. He had always been harder for me to refuse because he rarely demanded things outright. Mom pushed. Dad reasoned. Mom accused. Dad sighed. Mom could make an unreasonable request sound like an emergency. Dad could make the same request sound like the mature compromise any decent person should accept. About 5 weeks after the wedding, he called while Ryan and I were cleaning up after dinner. Got a minute? He asked. A few. He asked about work, Ryan, and the wedding photos before finally getting to the reason he had called. The venue agreed to the installment plan. That was the first time I knew the arrangement had been finalized. How many payments? 4. 1 a month? Yes. That's better than the whole balance being due at once. Dad gave a humorless laugh. It's still $63,000. I know. We had to rearrange some things. I waited. Some of it is coming from regular savings, some from the travel account. I knew the account. Mom and Dad had been planning a long retirement trip for almost 2 years. Ireland and Scotland, maybe France afterward. It was one of the few things Dad talked about with genuine excitement. You may have to postpone the trip. Yes, I'm sorry. Dad went quiet. You're sorry. Yes, but you're not going to help. No? He sounded almost baffled. I don't understand how those two things can both be true. I can be sorry something hurts you without believing I should stop it from hurting. You make that sound very clinical. I'm trying to be clear. This is your family, Sarah. I know. Not one of your vendor negotiations. I know that too. Then stop talking, like everything is about responsibility and signatures. I felt irritation rise. Dad, you called me to talk about a $63,000 bill. I called because I wanted you to understand what it's doing to us. I do understand. Do you? Yes. I know it affects your savings. I know it may delay a trip you've planned for years. I know you're angry because I could help financially, and I'm choosing not to. That matters. I know. And it doesn't bother you? Of course it bothers me. Then why are we still here? The answer came more easily than it would have a month earlier. Because feeling bad isn't the same as being responsible. Dad went quiet. Then he said, "Your mother and I have been fighting about this constantly. I did not ask for details." He was telling me what had happened. I had not witnessed the fights and did not need to imagine them. She thinks you're doing this to punish her. I'm not. I know. That surprised me. Do you? I know she went too far. Thank you. But I also think leaving the ballroom made everything more expensive. That's true. You could have stayed. Yes. You chose not to. Yes. He sounded frustrated that I was agreeing with him. I don't understand how you can acknowledge all of that and still refuse to help. Because my choice cost me almost $13,000. Yours cost you the ballroom balance. He sighed. We're going in circles. Then we can stop. There was a pause, and then Dad shifted to what I later realized had been the other reason for his call. Can you talk to your mother? I closed my eyes. What do you want me to tell her? That this constant fighting isn't helping. You can tell her that. She doesn't listen to me. That sounds like something between you and Mom. Sarah. What? You know how she gets. Yes. You've always been better at getting through to her. That sentence had worked on me for years because it sounded like praise. You're good at this. You're reasonable. You know what to say. It meant I was useful. And I liked being useful. I'm not calling her for you. Dad sounded genuinely taken aback. Why? Because then I'm back in the middle. It's one phone call. One phone call becomes Mom telling me why the bill is my fault. Then I explain why it isn't. Then she talks about Lauren. Then I'm calming Lauren. Then somehow I'm managing the exact problem I stepped away from. You don't know that. I know the pattern. You make us sound dysfunctional. I did not answer that. Dad sighed. Talking to your mother would cost you nothing. That isn't true. It's a phone call. It still costs something. He was silent. Then, more sharply, so now your answer to everything is just no? No. My answer to this is no. He hung up a minute later, frustrated but not screaming. I stood in the kitchen holding the phone after the call ended. Ryan turned off the faucet. What did he want? To tell me about the installment plan. And to ask me to fix Mom. Ryan smiled faintly. Of course. I said no. Good. I feel mean. You were polite. That isn't what I mean. He dried his hands and leaned against the counter. Talking to her isn't free just because there's no dollar amount. I'm good at it. That also doesn't make it free. That sentence stayed with me. Because Dad was right about one thing. I probably could have helped reduce the fighting. I knew exactly how to talk to Mom. I knew when to appeal to practicality, when to wait, when to redirect her. I had done it for years. Leaving a problem unsolved when I possessed the skills to solve it felt irresponsible. That was my flaw, not just theirs. Competence had become part of my identity. If I could handle a crisis, then I believed I should handle it. My family had merely learned to agree. The following weeks became an exercise in leaving solvable problems alone. Mom occasionally texted me directly. Most messages were normal. A restaurant recommendation, a photograph from a family dinner, a question about our wedding album. Then, without warning, she would send something like, "Your father is exhausted." Or, "We had to cancel utine re to way." Or, "I hope one day this feels worth it." I answered the normal messages when I wanted to. I ignored the guilt. Lauren gradually stopped sending every message Mom sent her. When she did forward something, she started saying, "Just letting you know," before I could ask. The family did not collapse. It adjusted. Badly, but it adjusted. By June, the wedding was no longer the first thing I thought about every morning. Ryan and I went back to work, finished our thank you cards, and sorted through the photographer's gallery. My favorite picture was not from the ballroom or even the ceremony. It was a candid photo taken under the garden pavilion. My hair was coming loose, Ryan's tie was crooked, and behind us were the mismatched chairs we had pulled together in less than an hour. I was laughing. For months before the wedding, I had cared about making everything look finished. That photograph captured the exact moment I stopped caring. Ordinary life came back in other ways, too. One Saturday, Ryan and I went shopping for a new couch. Within 20 minutes, I had created a note comparing frame materials, warranty terms, cushion density, price, and delivery times. Ryan looked over my shoulder. No. No what? We're buying a couch. I know. You made columns. There are 4 serious options. We are not acquiring a furniture company. I'm comparing value. He took the phone from me and sat on one of the couches. Sit. That is not sufficient research. Sit. I sat. The couch was comfortable. Ryan looked at me. Well, I hate your process. You love the couch. I hate that too. We bought it. No spreadsheet. It sounds insignificant compared with $63,000 and a family conflict, but it mattered. I was beginning to see how often I used competence to protect myself from uncertainty. If I understood every variable, I did not have to trust anybody else to handle things. If I solved every problem, I did not have to sit with the discomfort of leaving it unfinished. The wedding had forced me to choose without a perfect answer. My family was forcing me to allow consequences I could theoretically help reduce. Ryan was apparently forcing me to buy furniture like a normal person. By early July, almost 3 months had passed since the wedding, when Dad called and asked Ryan and me to meet him and Mom for dinner. What about? I asked. He hesitated. The money. My first instinct was no. Then he said, We're not asking you to take the whole bill. That sentence told me enough. What are you asking? I'd rather explain in person. Dad. Luan. How much? Half. $31,500. We would pay you back, he added quickly. This isn't us asking for a gift. Do you have repayment terms? We can work that out. So no. Sarah, just come to dinner. Your mother is willing to apologize. That gave me pause. What is she apologizing for? That's something she should say herself. I told him I would talk to Ryan. That night, after I explained the call, Ryan asked the question. He always seemed to ask when I was trying to turn emotion into logistics. Do you want to go? I want to hear what Dad has to say. Then go. You're coming. If you want me there, I do. I texted Dad that we would meet them, but that agreeing to dinner did not mean I was considering the loan. Understood, he replied. We met 3 nights later, at a quiet restaurant in Richmond. Mom and Dad were already seated when we arrived. Mom stood and hugged me. You look tired. You too. Her face tightened. Apparently that had not been the response she wanted. For nearly an hour, nobody mentioned money. Dad asked about work. Mom asked about the wedding photographs and whether we had chosen an album. Ryan told a story about his sister's dog destroying part of her backyard. The conversation was so ordinary that I found myself relaxing despite knowing exactly why we were there. I missed them. That was inconvenient. I had sometimes wished family conflict would simplify itself by making the people involved completely awful. It rarely did. Mom could manipulate me and still remember the dessert I liked. Dad could fail me badly and still be the man who taught me how to drive and waited in the parking lot through every college interview I ever had. Love made boundaries harder. It did not make them less necessary. After dinner plates were cleared, Dad folded his hands on the table. We've made 2 installments. I nodded. The 3rd is coming up. Okay. We can make it, but it's taking more out of savings than we're comfortable with. Mom looked at me. Dad continued. We want to ask whether you'd consider lending us half of the original balance. $31,500. Mom exhaled. Do you have to say it like that? Like what? Like you're in a boardroom. You're asking me for a $31,500 loan. You know the number. Yes. Dad raised his hand slightly. We would pay you back. Over how long? We haven't decided. What would the payments be? We'd work that out. Interest? Mom stared at me. Interest? If it's a loan, terms matter. We are your parents. I know. Dad said, we can put it in writing. That would be necessary. Mom folded her napkin beside her plate. I don't know when everything became documentation and boundaries with you. I almost smiled. Probably somewhere around the anniversary program. Ryan lowered his face toward his water glass. Mom did not appreciate it. I am trying to apologize. I sat back. Okay. She seemed surprised. Then she said, I'm sorry things got out of hand. I waited. What got out of hand? Her expression hardened. The wedding situation. What part? Sarah. I'm asking because I want to know what you're apologizing for. You know. No. I don't. She looked toward Dad. He stayed silent. Finally, Mom said, I should have talked to you more before expanding the anniversary. After I said no, her lips tightened. Yes, it was the closest she had come to acknowledging the actual choice. Then she added, but I never imagined you would react the way you did. The apology closed almost as soon as it opened. I believe that. You humiliated us. I moved my wedding. You left us with 150 people. You chose to keep the ballroom. What else were we supposed to do? Let it stop. Mom shook her head. Dad stepped in. Can we not relitigate the whole wedding? You asked me here because of its financial consequence. I asked because we need to move forward. With a loan? Yes. Then why the loan exists matters. Mom said, we're not asking you for the whole $63,000 anymore. I looked at her. That isn't the compromise you think it is. I don't know what you want from us. Nothing. She blinked. What? I'm not asking you for anything. You're obviously still angry. Yes. Then you want something. No. I'm allowed to be angry without assigning you a task to make it disappear. Mom stared at me as if the idea itself offended her. Dad leaned forward. Will you at least consider the loan? That was the real question. And what made it difficult was that I could afford it. Not comfortably. $31,500 would take a serious piece out of the savings Ryan and I had built. It would delay plans for a future house. It would reduce our emergency cushion enough that I would think about it every month until they repaid us. But we could survive it. If I said yes, Mom would probably stop calling about money. Dad would relax. Their final payments would become easier. Lauren would stop being pressured. Some relatives would decide I had finally been reasonable. The family could return to something resembling normal. For a few seconds, I felt the relief of that possibility. Then, I recognized it. I did not want to give them $31,500. I wanted to buy the end of the conflict. That was different. I looked at Dad. If I loan you the money, what changes between us? He frowned. What do you mean? Do you think what happened at the wedding was wrong? Your mother went too far. I'm asking about you. I signed because we were in a terrible situation. A situation I didn't create. You escalated it. I moved my wedding. Yes. And you kept the anniversary? Dad rubbed his forehead. We're back to the same argument. That's my point. If I give you the money, the argument doesn't disappear. You just stop feeling one of its consequences. Mom scoffed. So you want us to suffer? No. That's exactly what you're saying. No. I'm saying I'm not going to pay to make your consequence disappear. What's the difference? Whether I created it? Mom looked away. Dad said, You've already decided. Yes. Mom's eyes narrowed. Then why did you come? Because Dad asked me to listen. You had no intention of helping. I had every intention of considering what you said. And my answer is no. Not even a smaller amount? No. Dad's face changed. He looked disappointed rather than angry, and somehow that was harder. Not even half? No. The table went quiet. Then Mom said, You really have changed. I considered that. Yes. She looked surprised that I had not defended myself. I continued. The old version of me thought saying no meant I had to keep explaining until everyone else was comfortable. I don't think that anymore. Mom stared at me. So that's it? Yes? You're just going to watch us drain savings. I'm going to let you handle the agreement you signed. Dad said quietly, I thought we raised you to understand that family helps family. You did. Apparently not. I help people all the time. Not us. I've helped you plenty. This is different. Yes. Because you're angry. No. Because if I pay this, everybody learns that my no lasts only until the consequences become uncomfortable enough. Dad did not answer. Mom turned to Ryan. And you agree with this? Ryan put down his glass. I agree. Sarah decides what happens to her money. Convenient. Mom, I said. She looked at me. Don't make Ryan the explanation for a decision you don't like. I didn't. You were about to. You never acted like this before him. Ryan went still beside me. Dad closed his eyes. I felt myself become very calm. I sent you the email saying no before I married Ryan. That isn't what I meant. I know what you meant. You've changed since you met him. Yes. Again. She seemed unprepared for agreement. I've changed. That doesn't mean he made the decision. Mom folded her arms and looked away. The server approached, took one look at our table, and asked whether anyone wanted coffee instead of attempting to sell us dessert. Nobody did. Dad paid the check. Outside, the July air was warm and heavy. Mom hugged me before leaving. It was not a particularly affectionate hug, but I let her do it. Good night, she said. Good night. She walked toward their car. Dad stayed behind. Sarah. I turned. Can you wait a minute? Ryan looked at me. I'll be in the car. He kissed my temple and walked away. Dad and I stood near the restaurant entrance while people passed around us. He put his hands in his pockets and looked at the pavement. I had seen him do that my whole life when he had something uncomfortable to say. This time, I did not fill the silence for him. Finally, he said, You know I love you. I know. I don't want you thinking this is just about the money. What is it about? He looked toward the parking lot. I keep thinking about the wedding. So do I. The conference room. Something in my stomach tightened. Dad rubbed a hand over his jaw. There's something I should have told you. About what? The night I signed. I watched him carefully. For almost 3 months, I had wondered exactly what had been going through his mind when he picked up that pen. I knew what I had witnessed. He had seen the amount. He had read the agreement. Daniel had explicitly said Mom and Dad could let the ballroom event stop rather than assume it. I knew what Dad had done. I did not yet know why. What should you have told me? He looked at the ground again. The manager explained everything to me before I signed. I was there. I know. He told you that you didn't have to take over the ballroom. Dad nodded. Then he shook his head slightly. No, Sarah. I understood him. I went still. Dad finally looked at me. I understood exactly what he was telling me. Neither of us moved. Then he took a breath and said, The manager told me I didn't have to sign. I looked at Dad for several seconds, waiting for the rest of the sentence. Part of me already knew what was coming. Another part still wanted him to surprise me. I know, I said. No, I don't think you do. Then explain it. He looked toward the parking lot again. Mom was already sitting in their car. Through the windshield, I could see the glow of her phone against her face. Dad lowered his voice. I knew the contract was transferring to us. Yes. I knew you were being released. Yes. I knew the $63,000 would be ours. I waited. He rubbed the back of his neck. I signed because I thought you'd come back around. The words landed differently hearing them directly from him. What does that mean? I thought once you calmed down, we'd work something out. You keep saying work something out. I mean financially? There it was. I stared at him. How financially? Dad exhaled. I thought you'd pay it. The parking lot seemed very quiet. Not help. Not maybe contribute. Pay it. I felt something inside me settle rather than break. The question I had been carrying since April finally had an answer. You signed a $63,000 agreement because you thought I would eventually pay it. When you say it like that, how else should I say it? I didn't think you'd leave us with the whole amount. That's not the same sentence. Dad's face tightened. I thought you were angry. I thought the wedding had become emotional, and that once you had time to cool down, you'd realize none of us could undo what had happened. The venue told you how to undo it. That would have meant shutting everything down. Yes. In front of everyone. Yes. Your mother was beside herself. Lauren was crying. Half the family had no idea what was happening. I was trying to keep the night from becoming a disaster. And you decided I would absorb the disaster later. That is not what I was thinking. It is exactly what you just told me. Dad looked away. I had spent months trying not to turn suspicion into fact. I had reminded myself over and over that I did not know what Dad had believed when he signed. I knew Mom expected me to rescue them. I knew Lauren had predicted I would rather pay than make a scene. But Dad had always lived in a safer category in my head. Passive, conflict avoidant, weak in bad moments maybe, but not calculating. The truth was more ordinary and more painful. Dad had not thought I deserved the bill. He had simply thought I would take it. That distinction mattered. You knew I said no to the anniversary, I said. Yes. You knew Mom went ahead anyway. Yes. You knew I was moving my wedding because of it. Yes. You knew the manager gave you the option to stop the ballroom. Yes. And you signed because you believed I would eventually protect you from the cost. Dad looked at me. I believed you wouldn't let us lose that kind of money. There it was again. Not that he thought the contract was mine, that he thought I would not let the consequence remain his. I nodded slowly. Thank you. His expression changed. For what? For finally saying it clearly. That's not what I wanted you to take from this. What did you want me to take? That I wasn't trying to hurt you. I know. He seemed surprised. You know? Yes. I don't think you wanted to hurt me. Then why are you looking at me like that? Because you didn't have to want to hurt me to decide I was the safest person to disappoint. Dad said nothing. I continued because I had spent too many years leaving this part unsaid. You were trying to keep peace. Yes, but not peace for everyone. He frowned. You kept choosing the conflict that cost you the least in the moment. Mom was panicking, so you didn't challenge her. Lauren was upset, so you didn't end the anniversary. The ballroom was full, so you didn't let the event stop. I was angry, but I was still the person you thought would be reasonable later. That's not fair. It is. I was standing in the middle of a family disaster. No, you were standing in the middle of choices. Dad looked away. I didn't know what else to do. You did. His eyes came back to mine. The manager told you. He flinched slightly. You knew exactly what would happen if you didn't sign. The ballroom would stop. Mom would be humiliated. Lauren would be humiliated. Some relatives would be confused. That was the consequence. And you think that would have been better? For me? Yes. Dad shook his head. I couldn't do that to your mother. I felt the last piece click into place. You could do it to me. He went still. That's not what I meant. I know. That's why it matters. His face softened. Sarah. No. I need you to hear this. You didn't choose Mom because she was right. You chose her because she was harder to disappoint. Dad's mouth opened, then closed. I could see him searching for an argument. There wasn't one. For most of my life, Dad had described himself as the person who kept the family together. I had believed that too. But keeping peace by repeatedly giving the most difficult person what she wanted was not neutrality. It was a decision about whose pain mattered least. Mine had always been manageable. That was what made me useful. Dad looked down at the pavement. I'm sorry. It was quiet enough that I almost missed it. I did not rush to accept. He continued. I should have stopped it. I felt my chest tighten. Yes. I should have told your mother no before it ever got to the contract. Yes. And when it did get there, I should have let the ballroom close. I nodded. Dad rubbed a hand over his face. I kept telling myself I was preventing a scene. You were delaying one. I know that now. I looked toward their car. Mom was no longer looking at her phone. She was watching us. Dad followed my gaze. She's not going to see it the way I do. I know. She still thinks you could have handled everything differently. I know. I don't know how to fix that. For the first time, his use of the word fix did not feel like a request. You may not be able to. Dad nodded slowly. Then he looked at me. Are we okay? It was such a dad question. A yes or no request for a relationship that had become much more complicated than that. We're not where we were. His expression fell. But I'm standing here talking to you. He nodded. That's something. Yes. I did not hug him. He did not ask me to. When I got into Ryan's car, he looked at me and immediately knew something important had happened. What did he say? I buckled my seatbelt. He thought I'd pay. Ryan's face changed. He said that? Yes. Exactly? He said he thought once I calmed down, I'd help them pay it. Then when I pushed him, he said he thought I wouldn't let them lose that kind of money. Ryan leaned back against the seat. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then, "How do you feel?" "Tired." "Anything else?" "Relieved." "That one surprises me. It doesn't mean I'm happy." "I know. I spent months wondering if I was being unfair to him. Now I know." Ryan started the car. "Knowing is cleaner." "Yes. Not kinder. Cleaner?" That night, I slept better than I expected. Nothing had been repaired. Dad's admission did not refund my $8,000 or erase my mother's choices. It did not change Lauren's silence. It did not turn my wedding into the day I had planned. It simply removed the last excuse I was still making for him. That mattered. Over the next few weeks, my relationship with my parents settled into something I could finally describe honestly. Low contact. Not estrangement. Not punishment. Not some dramatic declaration that they were dead to me. We spoke when I wanted to speak. I answered messages when they were normal. I declined invitations when I did not want to go. I stopped explaining every decline. Mom hated that more than any argument. If she asked whether Ryan and I were coming to Sunday dinner and I said, "Not this week," she would reply, "Why?" At first I explained. Then I started saying, "We have other plans." "What plans?" "Other plans." It felt rude the first few times. Then it felt peaceful. She did not become a different person. I did not expect her to. She still occasionally sent messages designed to make me feel the financial cost of what happened. She mentioned their delayed travel plans. She mentioned Dad taking on extra consulting work. Once she sent, "I hope that garden dinner was worth what this family lost." I stared at the message for several minutes. Then I deleted it. I did not send the photograph of me laughing under the pavilion lights. I did not tell her yes. I did not tell her no. Some sentences are not invitations to dialogue. They are hooks. I was learning not to bite. Dad changed more quietly. He stopped asking me to mediate. He stopped saying, "We'll figure it out," about money. When we spoke, he occasionally told me where they were with the installments, but he did not ask me to participate. The first time he called and said, "Third payment went through today," I replied, "Okay." He said, "That's all? What else do you need?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Nothing." That was progress. Lauren's apology took longer. In late July, she asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. Just us. No Mom. No Aaron. No Ryan. I almost said no because I had gotten used to distance. Distance was easy. It did not demand much. Then I realized easy was not automatically healthy either. I agreed. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. Lauren was already there when I arrived, sitting outside under an umbrella with 2 drinks. "I guessed," she said, pushing one toward me. "You guessed right." I remembered. That tiny correction mattered more than it should have. For the first 20 minutes, we talked about everything except the wedding. Work. Aaron, a neighbor who had somehow become engaged in a 6-month war with Lauren over a tree branch crossing the property line. It almost felt normal. Then Lauren wrapped both hands around her cup. "I owe you an apology. I did not help her." She looked down. "I kept saying I didn't plan what Mom did because I thought that meant I wasn't responsible." I waited. I didn't order anything. I didn't deal with the venue. I didn't know every detail until right before the wedding. All of that is true. Yes. But I knew you were uncomfortable. I stayed quiet. Lauren looked at me. "I knew you were uncomfortable, and I decided that wasn't the same as you saying no." The sentence was better than anything she had said before, but not complete. I did say no. She closed her eyes. I know. There it was. No excuse after it. "No, but Mom told me." "No. I thought you were stressed." "No. I didn't know you'd react like that." "Just I know," Lauren continued. "I wanted the party." I nodded. I liked the idea that everyone would already be together. I liked that our friends were there. I liked the dress. I liked the dance. And once Mom told me you probably wouldn't stop it in front of everyone, I decided that was good enough. That's what hurt. I know. I could have handled you wanting an anniversary party. I know. What I couldn't handle was everyone deciding my silence would count as permission. Lauren's eyes filled, but she did not start crying. I'm sorry. This time she stopped there. I believed her. Believing an apology and restoring trust are different things. I accept that. She let out a breath. Does that mean we're okay? I smiled a little. You sound like Dad. That bad? A little. She laughed. Then I said, it means I believe you're sorry. And the rest? The rest takes time. Lauren nodded. I can live with that. That was probably the healthiest answer anyone in my family had given me all year. Before we left, she pulled an envelope out of her bag. I looked at it. What's that? Money. I immediately pushed it back toward her. No, Sarah, I'm not taking money from you for the ballroom. It's not for the ballroom. Then what is it? She hesitated. For you. That clears up nothing. She sighed and opened the envelope herself. Inside was a check. Not $10,000. Not 15. 3,000. I decided I should contribute something, she said. Not because Mom told me to. I'm not giving it to her. Why me? Because you lost money moving the reception. Lorraine, I know you chose to move it. I know you didn't ask me for this. That's why I'm giving it to you. I looked at the check. I don't need this. I know. Aaron is okay with it? Yes. We talked about it for weeks. Mom knows? No. That made me laugh. Lauren smiled faintly. I'm not trying to buy forgiveness. Good. I'm trying to pay for one small part of something I benefited from. I studied her. Part of me wanted to refuse out of principle. Another part recognized that refusing would also be a way of controlling the situation. Lauren had finally made a decision without asking me to set the number, without asking Mom to approve it, and without pretending she owed nothing, simply because she had not signed the contract. You're sure? Yes. I took the envelope. Thank you. She nodded. Then she said, Mom is going to lose her mind if she finds out. That sounds like her problem. Lauren laughed so loudly 2 people at the next table looked over. We did not become best friends again. We started having coffee once a month. Sometimes one of us canceled. Sometimes the conversation was awkward. Sometimes it was good. Trust returned in inches. I preferred that to pretending. At home, my own habits were changing too. One evening in August, the kitchen sink started leaking under the cabinet. Normally, I would have been on the floor with a flashlight before the first drop hit the wood. Instead, Ryan said, I'll handle it. Every part of me wanted to ask how. Which plumber? When? How much? Was he sure it was the pipe and not the disposal? Did he check the shutoff valve? I opened my mouth, then closed it. Ryan looked at me suspiciously. What? Nothing. That looked painful. It was. He laughed. The next afternoon, a plumber came. The sink was fixed. Civilization survived without my project plan. I hated how educational that was. By August, nearly 4 months had passed since the wedding. The family had not returned to what it had been before April 18th. That was no longer my goal. Mom had lost something more important to her than the money. Control. Not control over everything. She still had opinions. She still knew how to make a room orbit around her when people allowed it. But her version of the wedding no longer stood uncontested. The relatives who had seen the documents knew I had said no. Some still thought I should have paid. Some thought I had been absolutely right. Most eventually got tired of discussing it. That was fine. I had never needed unanimity. Dad lost something too. The easy version of our closeness. I still loved him. I still answered many of his calls. But he no longer got to be the neutral parent in my mind. He had made a choice on my wedding day, and I had stopped protecting him from the meaning of it. Lauren lost my automatic trust. She also lost the comfortable position of being the child Mom protected, without asking for anything in return. Once I stopped absorbing the pressure, some of it moved toward her. Lauren did not enjoy that lesson. Neither had I. But she was learning. And Mom? Mom lost the daughter who could be counted on to clean up the consequences after everyone else finished making choices. That was the real bill she hated paying. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was at work, my phone buzzed. Dad. There was no greeting. Just a photograph. I opened it. A venue receipt. The amount was visible at the top. The final installment had been processed. Beneath it, in plain text, was the status. Paid. Dad had covered the account number before taking the picture. Under the photo, he had written 2 words. It's done. I stared at the screen. For nearly 4 months, $63,000 had been a living thing in my family. Every phone call eventually found its way back to it. Every accusation. Every compromise. Every attempt to redefine responsibility. Now it was a paid receipt. I did not ask where the final money came from. I did not ask whether Mom was still angry. I did not ask how much remained in their travel account. Dad had chosen to send me the receipt. That was enough. I typed, "I'm glad it's settled." He replied a few minutes later, "Me too." That evening, I showed Ryan the picture. We were sitting on our new couch, the one I had bought without a spreadsheet. He looked at the receipt. "So that's really it?" "Yes." He handed the phone back. Then he studied me for a second. "Do you feel vindicated?" I thought about it. The words sounded too triumphant. Vindication belonged to stories where being proven right restored everything. Nothing had been restored. My mother and I were still careful with each other. Dad and I were rebuilding something less convenient but more honest. Lauren and I were learning how to be sisters without me automatically becoming her emergency contact for every family problem. My wedding had cost Ryan and me nearly $13,000 more than planned, including the lost ballroom retainer. There was no victory that erased any of that. "No," I said. Ryan leaned back. "Then what?" I looked across the room at the framed wedding photograph on the wall. The garden, the mismatched chairs, the flowers we had carried outside, Ryan's crooked tie, my hair coming loose, me laughing. For most of my life, I had believed being the strong daughter meant carrying more responsibility, more forgiveness, more inconvenience, more emotional weight, because I was supposedly better equipped to handle it. And people will let you believe that strength means endurance, if your endurance makes their lives easier. I had spent years being my family's unpaid infrastructure. The planner, the translator, the person who could absorb bad timing, bad decisions, uncomfortable bills, and difficult feelings until everything looked stable again. My mother had mistaken that role for love. My father had mistaken it for reliability. Lauren had mistaken it for inevitability. I had mistaken it for identity. The wedding finally taught me something simpler. Being capable does not make every problem yours. Loving someone does not require protecting them from consequences they freely chose. And a boundary without consequences is often nothing more than a request the other person has learned to ignore. I looked at the paid receipt one last time and turned off my phone. Ryan was still waiting. "What?" he asked. I smiled. "Finished. You can love your family without paying for choices they made against your wishes. When you clearly say no, you should not keep explaining until everyone becomes comfortable with your answer. A healthy boundary requires consequences. Because people who benefit from ignoring your limits have little reason to respect them otherwise. Help others when you genuinely choose to help, not because guilt, embarrassment, or pressure makes surrender feel easier. Being capable does not make you responsible for fixing every family problem. Protect your money, time, peace, and relationships with clear decisions. If this story gave you something valuable, subscribe for more family stories and lessons.